Very much. This is the Committee on Foreign Relations. Being that we suspended at the previous hearing, there will be no need for any quorum, although I await the presence of our minority representatives. Senator Risa Ontiveros was manifested her desire to join us this afternoon. Therefore, we have today, as noted, several items on the agenda. Firstly, the notion of the SEATO, perhaps. Let's change around um, the land. We can start with the landing of the aircraft, but perhaps we can start also with the SEATO and the strengthening of the Mutual Defense Treaty. Okay, so let's call on Attorney Dana Alberto uh, re- to acknowledge and recognize all our guests.
Good after Good afternoon. The Committee on Foreign Relations would like to acknowledge the presence of our distinguished guests, namely, from the Department of Foreign Affairs, we have Assistant Secretary Jose Victor Chan Gonzaga, Deputy Undersecretary Hans Mohaimin Siriban, Undersecretary Pedro Cesar Ramboango Jr., Mr. Rosel Reyes. From the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we have Brigadier General Romel R. Cordova, PA. From Department of National Defense, we have Undersecretary Reneo C. Espino, Assistant Secretary Pablo M. Lorenzo. Ma'am, Undersecretary Ignacio B. Madriaga is in the West Philippine Sea briefing, ma'am. Department.
Sorry, sorry.
At the DND, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah. He's at the West Philippine Sea briefing.
At the DND.
Oh, DND. Okay, so he's not joining us, is the point. Okay.
From the Department of Justice, we have Attorney Ulysses A. Aguila. From the Philippine Coast Guard, we have Vice Admiral Rolando Lizor N. Punsalan Jr. From the Office of the Solicitor General, we have Attorney Gilbert U. Medrano. We have the observers from the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency.
Where are they?
From the Manila International Airport Authority, we have Senior Assistant General Manager Brian Anderson Co.
Where?
Mr. Rafael Regular, and Mr. Edwin Magbitang.
You're all from NAIA. Okay.
Okay. From the National
Yes, the
Security
chair recognizes the presence of our minority senator, Risa Ontiveros. Thank you for joining me.
From the National Security Council, we have Assistant Director General Francis Jude S. Lawenco. From the Department of Transportation, Director Jose V. Carillo. Transport Security Plans and Policy Service. Okay. From the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines, we have Captain Manuel Antonio El Tamayo. Sorry. That will be all, Senator Marcos. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the first matter on the agenda is essentially the resolution that I filed earlier in June to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation regarding the landing at the Manila International Airport of a U.S. Air Force aircraft that ended up, I think, upwards of 9 to 10 hours on the tarmac. And agitated quite a few of our countrymen. It's apparent that Manila International Airport was not given any advisory regarding the arrival of the aircraft. And we also recognize Senator Bato de la Rosa here with us. And as a result, there was a level of confusion, although later on it was explained that the C-17 military aircraft was in the country to support a bilateral military exercise, and that a clerical or error, some of the information provided for the flight clearance was incorrect. They actually landed in the wrong uh, terminal, in the wrong area, and that they had to stop in the NAIA to comply with Philippine customs and immigration requirements, and that the cargo was in support of a marine aviation activity. But the U.S. flight planners failed to properly coordinate ground requirements. Is that correct? So far, um, the CAAP also stated that for their part, they required the submission of a flight plan at least 1 hour before departure from Guam because it's a foreign military aircraft, and that whereas there had been perhaps coordination between the U.S. military, the U.S. Embassy, the DFA Department of DND, the same was not approved in the flight operations briefing station of Guam. So there was a level of confusion, and that being the case, agitated some of the Filipinos regarding the unexpected landing in the airport here in Manila. I believe that the same has occurred elsewhere. I know that I was in Tacloban, for example, when certain U.S. aircraft also arrived, to the great consternation of the locals. So if the senators had opening statement, that's all I have to say right now about this until we get further clarification on the procedures and requirements that have been established, such that we are no longer unduly agitated by these occurrences. So, Senator Risa, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, at magandang hapon po sa lahat. No opening statement, Madam Chair. I'm prepared to go straight to the questions about the three resolutions. Salamat po.
Thank you, Senator Bato. No opening statement. We're just seeking clarification from your end, therefore. Can you enlighten us on the procedures and requirements for the landing of foreign government planes in the country? I think the distinguished international lawyer Harry Roque made the following statement similarly. Kung isa kang eroplano, dapat may mismong paliparan o Civil Aviation Authority ng Pilipinas makipag-ugnayan para maayos ang paglanding. Hindi dapat DFA ang kinokontak ng US military airplane singgil sa kanilang paglanding sa NAIA. Ano ba talaga ang tamang gagawin para hindi nagugulanta ang ating mga tao? Perhaps I'll call first DFA and thereafter CAAP. Ipaliwanag lang ninyo ano ba ang procedure dito. Before we begin, I forgot. I think it's best that we put you all under oath. Yes, thank you. Yes, Secretary, please.
Good afternoon. Kindly rise. And also raise your right hand, please. Okay. Repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Ulysses Saglas,
Do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
to tell
DFA to please enlighten us regarding these procedures and the protocols for landing of foreign military planes in the country.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to the honorable senators on the committee. So I think, Madam Chair, when it comes to the landing or to the entry into the Philippines of foreign military aircraft, essentially, there are a couple of things that are important to remember. One is the need for the diplomatic clearance, which is really, I guess, the initial step that any foreign government needs to undertake. And then after that diplomatic clearance is issued by the department, then, of course, as the chair had pointed out, there has to be the necessary coordination with the CAAP, with the airport. I would defer to colleagues from CAAP and to MIA for their protocols. And perhaps Undersecretary Rambuanga will also have something to say on the part of the Presidential Commission on Visiting Forces.
Yes, with
But-
regard to this specific incident.
Yes po.
In July, in June, may I know if in fact there was diplomatic clearance and notice?
Yes, ma'am. I think in the end, the problem was the miscommunication that you had made in your initial comments. But yes, we can confirm that a diplomatic clearance was issued for that particular C-17 flight. And if you will allow me, I will just outline briefly for the committee the process that
So
normally takes place for
in
the
this
issue.
case, there was diplomatic clearance.
Yes,
Anong
Madam Chair.
nangyari? Hindi nasabihan ang CAAP?
We do not believe that that is the case in this instance. The problem was, as you were saying in your initial comments, Madam Chair, is that there was a miscommunication between the ground handler and the U.S. Embassy and obviously with the airport authorities.
Okay, carry on. Yeah.
Madam Chair, may,
Senator,
may interject. If that is not the case, if that was not the case, can you categorically say na merong issue kayo ng diplomatic clearance, hindi nyo na-advisean yung CAAP about that, yung DND about that, na meron tayong diplomatic clearance na binigay dito sa mga Amerikano na pumunta dito. Hindi nyo nasabihan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, sorry, Madam Chair. We informed all the relevant government authorities. The problem was there was miscommunication between the ground handler eventually and the airport authorities.
Oh, sabi ng CAAP, wala daw silang alam. Hindi daw kayo nagsabi. Ang DP
CAAP
hindi daw
sabi
nagsabi.
walang alam eh.
Where's CAAP?
Dito,
Yes, CAAP, sir.
Captain Ski, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Yeah, I still have our text thread regarding this, and it was apparent that CAAP was the last to know. Please explain.
I would like to support the statement coming from the DFA that indeed everything was followed. As far as CAAP is concerned, we get the lead from the Department of National Defense through the
I'm
Philippines.
sorry if everything was followed. Bakit 10 oras halos sila nakatambay dun sa NAIA?
Regarding that, the stay of the aircraft for 10 hours, we didn't have any information on that.
Wait, you just said you were informed. Now you're saying you had no information. Alin ba talaga?
No, ma'am. As far as the procedures are concerned, so we get the lead using a diplomatic note, and then most of the coordination are done with the DND through the Philippine Air Defense Command Center. Even the details, doon ho nanggagaling. Now, as far as the flight plan is concerned of the subject aircraft, we have it here on hand that indeed they filed a flight plan to stop Manila on 25 June.
When did you receive the flight plan? Kasi ang pagkasabi ninyo nung naglanding, nagulanta rin kayo eh.
June 25 and
June 25, ma'am, at 10:45 p.m. in the evening, and then the flight came the following morning.
So, alam nga ninyo
Yes,
na
sir.
darating.
Darating, alam.
So, hindi correct yung sinasabi na hindi alam ng CAAP.
Alam namin, sir.
Alam ninyo.
Alam namin po.
So, anong problema
Eh,
dyan?
bakit yung sinabi ninyo, bakit sinabi niyo hindi ninyo alam? As a matter of fact, admitido pati yung US Embassy na naglanding nga sa maling airstrip. Hindi yung para sa reserve ng military.
No, no, ma'am, it's here. I'm sorry. But the first destination.
Yun ang pagkasabi nila sa amin eh. Nung nagtanong kami.
It's really,
Mali-mali daw lahat eh.
it's really
Pati
Manila.
yung landing area.
Ang mali yata, ma'am, is tama rin yung nasabi nyo. There was some confusion as far as the handling agent is concerned in Manila. But the destination, first destination is in Manila prior to Puerto Princesa. Doon ho nagkagulo dahil nung naglanding ang aeroplano, they didn't even know where to park because the handling agent did not coordinate with MIA na dadating ito at kung saan magpa-park or whatever requirements they needed.
Teka, nakakatama dito kasi nagkakaturoan. Ang kaap may alam, pero ang kaap at ang MIA hindi nag-usap. Ganun ba yun?
If I may, ma'am, as far as international flights are, ito, especially diplomatic or military, we do not coordinate directly with NIA regarding this because yung information na to is shared to us and we keep it to ourselves. Now, it is the handling agent who is supposed to coordinate with NIA regarding parking and other requirements.
So, Madam Chair, ito ba'y klarong kaso ng mishandling? Mishandling on the part of the handlers?
It appears that way, Your Honor. Apparently, they were not informed.
Ang concern lang natin
I
dito
would like to recognize the arrival. Senator Tulfo, please. Thank you. Sorry, Bato.
Yes, Madam Chair. So, alam ng kaap, alam ng DND, alam niyo sir, na darating yun. So, wala tayong palisigaps nito kung gano'n, walang problema. Siguro yung mishandling lang. So, sinong government agency dapat magkukorek doon sa handlers? Sino may hawak ng mga handlers na yun, Madam Chair?
If I may, sir,
Yes.
kasi it is the U.S. Embassy, the U.S. authorities that are in contract, have a contract with the handling agent, ground handler.
So
which is AGs.
wala kayong sort of regulating powers dito sa mga handlers?
Wala po, ma'am. As
Wala
far as that is
talaga.
concerned.
Mga private to. Basta lulusot, papasok na lang ito doon sa vicinity ng airport na wala kayong control. Ganun ba?
Mia,
If I may, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Andito po yung taga-MIA. I think they have the jurisdiction.
Tama,
for the
MIA.
ground handlers are concerned.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So,
Madam
wala,
Chair.
wala kayong communication ng kaap at MIA noong June at hanggang ngayon? Kasi labas-pasok itong mga eroplano, minsan nagugulanta nga yung mga tao at bakit walang alam. Yes, sa MIA.
Yes.
Hindi kayo nasabihan?
Your Honor, we confirm that for this particular flight, MIAA is not aware that parating yung aircraft po. So the time that we knew it was coming here, nung nagland na po, kaya po walang na-assign na parking slot. Under the right procedure po, an aircraft operator or let's say a charterer or ito yung military aircraft po, number one, they should have sought air traffic clearance or yung landing permit which they were able to secure from CAAP. The next step would have been for them or their appointed ground handler to communicate with the airport para po makakuha ng mga ground slot para sa mga facilities sa airport. That next step po yung na-miss natin. Although they had the landing permit, there was no coordination made by the aircraft operator or the ground handler with the MIAA. Kaya po hindi po namin ina-expect na may darating na C-17 na ganong aircraft registry on June 26 po.
Ang pagkaalam ko na ulit din to may iba pang mga airport kung saan naglanding na nagulat din sila. Tama ba, kaap? Kasi this is not the first or the last time that this occurred. There were several other landings of aircraft, particularly aircraft that are not U.S. military aircraft, but rather only those contracted by the U.S. Air Force to help with their operations here in the Philippines. Tama po ba?
If I may, ma'am, as far as the U.S. military is concerned, all of their movements are coordinated at meron pong diplomatic clearance that was furnished to us.
No, the question now appears to be no longer the diplomatic clearance, but more importantly, the administrative clearance and the communications on the ground. Because as I said, maliban pa dito sa nangyari sa June 26, may iba pang landing sa iba't ibang lugar na nagulat din yung mga nandun. Kaya't I think there were several actually that followed this resolution as I recall. Yes, Captain Tamayo. You're saying that everything was cleared. Bakit nagkakaganito? Minsan nagdi-delay ng 6 hours, ito 10 hours, ito yung pinakamalala. If everything was prearranged and everyone had been properly notified, I don't think there would be delays of such long periods na nakasalansang yung eroplano dun sa airstrip at walang makagalaw.
Like what happened in this case, ma'am, perhaps it is again a miscommunication with the handling agent of the foreign aircraft, if ever. But as far as CAAP is concerned, all the movements we are aware. Yung mga
Whose duty is it to inform the ground handlers, the individual airports? And who is supposed to tell the individual airports?
As far as the individual airports are concerned, ma'am, kami naman, we just issue a clearance for the flight plan na inapprove and it will arrive at this point. But when it comes to the handling agent, like what happened sa MIA, dapat diretso ho yung the owner of the aircraft itself.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if I may,
Senator
Yeah.
De La Rosa.
Yung-
Parang magulo yun eh.
Yeah.
Kasi sa itaas, alam niyo lahat. Pero sa ibaba, wala naman
Wala.
sinasabihan.
So-
Paano ba yung ganun?
maybe Madam Chair, we can ask Naya. Kilala niyo yung handler na yun?
Your Honor, there's si US government, sir, meron silang usual handler which
Kaya nga,
is Aegis
kilala niyo.
Aviation.
Pilipino rin yun,
Yes
Pilipino.
po, opo.
Oh, so pwede ba yung i-ban yun dyan sa NAIA, yung mga handler na yun? Huwag niyo papasukin, mga bastos kayo. Hindi mo lang kayo magpaalam sa amin. Kaming may-ari ng airport. Ninoy Aquino International Airport Authority. Pero wala kaming authority sa inyo na papasok sa airport namin. Sabihan niyo yung iba ninyo. Hindi porque you are catering to the US embassy. Wala na kaming authority na mag-impose sa aming authority dito sa airport. Sabihan nyo, banin nyo yan, hanapin nyo yung mga handler na yun. Huwag na nyo papasukin dyan sa airport.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ay, it creates confusion. Simple, maliit lang na bagay yan na walang coordination. Pero hindi nyo alam. Binabastos kayo ng mga tao na yun, hindi man lang nagpaalam sa inyo, kayong authority ng airport. Dapat ipa-coordinate sa inyo, hindi porke mga Amerikano yung kanilang mga siniservisyuhan. Basta-basta na lang kayong binabaliwala yung authority nyo sa airport. Mag-coordinate sila, di ba? O, yun lang, Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator De La Rosa. Yeah, we take very seriously this incident, and I think it's quite unnecessary because, as it turns out, it appears to have been a VFA exercise that had been previously agreed upon. Pero paulit-ulit na nangyayari, bakit hindi nasasabihan? So clearly, the procedure is not in place. Okay, you have all the diplomatic clearances as well as the CAAP clearances, pero naaalarma pa rin ang mga tao sa iba't ibang probinsya kung saan naglalanding. Sino ba ang dapat na magsabi? Di ba dapat CAAP? Di ba kayo in charge ng lahat ng airport? Kasi miski sa lawag na gulat din yung mga tao na may nagdadatingan, hindi pa nakatatak na US Air Force yung eroplano kasi subcontractor lang yung pinadala. So, paulit-ulit to. We know there are 500 exercises per year. So, paulit-ulit. How do we make sure na hindi naaalarma ang mga tao at alam nila na aabisuhan yung mga airport sa ibaba?
Ma'am, as far as our airports are concerned, as I said kanina, alam lahat nila yung flights na pupunta ron because we issue the clearances.
Hindi
Flight
nga
plans.
di ba? Sabi nga
Y-
ng ground handler, hindi alam.
Yun ho ang problema. We are not in touch with the ground handler, but it is the country of origin. Sila ho ang US Air Force ho, kunyari, sila ho ang may contract sa Aegis.
So ang sinasabi mo, hindi ang NAIA, hindi ang CAAP, kundi yung US Air Force ang hindi nagsabi sa ground handler nila?
Yes, ma'am. Sila yung may contract doon sa ground handler.
DND. Any comment, please?
May problema tayo dyan, ma'am. Visiting process agreement.
Ayun na,
Ayusin niyo yan.
yung mga
Ayusin niyo
VFA,
yan.
kayo na ngayon ang tinuturo. Kayo daw ang dapat mag-inform. Paano ba ito? Huwag tayong ganito. Dapat i-sort out natin. Nandito kami para tumulong. At the end of the day, every Senate inquiry is in aid of legislation. That is, in that case, it's prospective, always in character. Gusto natin na hindi na maulit itong mga bulilyasong ganito at natataranta yung mga tauhan natin. Yung mamaya nagugulanta at kinakabahan kung sino-sino dumarating. So, paano natin maiiwasan to sa mga susunod pang exercise? Alam natin, napakarami nito eh. Yes, Asek Gonzaga, please.
Ma'am, good. If I may, well, I see two things. One is on. If I can just go back to what Captain Tamayo was saying earlier, the ground handler is the one who is supposed to coordinate with the airport. So it's not the airports that should coordinate with the ground handler. So the ground handler should coordinate with the airport. And obviously, the ground handler needs to be informed by the contractor, by the
Teka,
US
teka, you
government.
have to take me through this na naman. Nalito na naman ako. Alin mauuna? Kasi there's clearly a lack of coordination between DND, DFA, and the CAAP, and as well as the Americans, no? So you are now saying that it's the duty of the US to tell their
Yeah.
ground handler, what comes first muna?
Opo.
Ipaliwanag mo yung procedure para
Yes,
nasusundan namin.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Now, there are two things basically here. One is the diplomatic clearance side, which I think everyone is agreed in this particular case, and I would like to believe in all cases, is fully coordinated among the relevant agencies. So that's DFA, CAAP, DND, AFP, and the U.S. Embassy, which is the one that initiates the request. Now, the problem in the C-17 case, and which might be the problem also in the other cases that you say took place, is the coordination between the ground handler and the particular airport in which they are going to land. Because once the diplomatic clearance is issued, then the coordination at the policy offices is over. It's now operationally between the ground handler and the airport where the airplane is going to land. And that's
I'm
what
sorry,
the
so,
problem was in the
come again.
C-17 po.
The ground handler is supposed to be informed by the U.S. Air Force. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And we have no duty to do the same, even if we're fully aware that such a landing is going to occur.
I don't think so po. Yeah.
Can we clarify?
Yeah.
Yes, CAAP. Tama ba yun? Basta
Ma'am, it is,
bahala na yung ground handler, siya lang ang magsasabi. Yung ground handler na lang, yung ground handler lang at saka yung US Air Force ang mag-uusap, sila nang bahala. Inform the airport.
Ma'am,
Parang pali yata yun. Anong papel ng Pilipino doon? Atin pa rin ang airport, sabi nga ni Senator De La Rosa.
ma'am, as far as the ground handler is concerned, they are the ones who have a contract with the US authorities.
Sila mag-uusap, pero yung
Yes, ma'am.
airport atin eh.
The airport is ours, pero yung ground handler nga ang dapat makipag-coordinate do sa airport itself, like what happened to Mia.
But how does the airport know that it was cleared or not? Dapat nagsabi rin kayo, di ba? Para alam ng airport na authorized yung landing na yon.
As I said nga kanina, ma'am, the information given to us by DND and DFA is exclusively for us and it is not shared among the others. And I think that was confirmed by
Hindi,
Mia as
pag
well.
nagtanong yung airport, totoo ba to? Cleared ba to? Kanino sila magtatanong? Yung airport. Sinabihan ng ground handler yung airport. Yung airport, hindi alam kung totoo, hindi. At tama naman, i-confirm niya. Kanino niya dapat i-confirm?
Madam Chair, I would assume that, I don't know, maybe our colleague from MIA can explain. I would assume they would have the paperwork that would be necessary for MIA to grant the slots and everything. Sir?
Your Honor, if I may. You're correct that in this case, they were able to get a landing permit from the CAAP. So that's the first step. So when I say they, these are the aircraft operator or the aircraft owner. And in this case, it's the US military po. So the next step would have been for them to coordinate with their local ground handler dito. And that local ground handler will submit the requirements to MIAA. Kasama po dito sa requirements natin is a permit to operate non-scheduled flight operations. And kasama po dun sa required attachment natin yung mga permit na in-issue ng CAAP po. But in this case po, dumating po yung aircraft without any ground handler coordinating with us. Kaya po doon tayo nagka-problem. It's between, it's the aircraft owner or operator that has not coordinated with the ground handler, and the ground handler did not coordinate po with MIAA in this case po.
So, Madam Chair, para itong kwan ang NAIA, may-ari ng bahay. Itong CAAP, DND, mga kapitbahay ng NAIA. Ngayon, meron silang bisita, itong mga Amerikano, na darating na pupunta sa bahay ng NAIA. Ngayon, the sad reality is that kayong lahat, okay kayo na bibisita yung bisita niyo dito sa ating lugar, particularly sa bahay ng NAIA, ang may-ari ng bahay hindi alam na mayroon palang bisita na darating doon sa kanila. Simple, kung ba? Binisaya na explanation ba? Di ba? Oo. Dapat yung may-ari ng bahay, sabihan ninyo na mayroong darating kaming bisita, imbitado, para yung may-ari ng bahay makapag-prepare, makapanglinis, makaprepare ng pagkain para ma-welcome yung bisita, di ba? Hindi yung maggulat na lang yung may-ari ng bahay. Ngayon, biniblame ninyo yung handler, yung ground handler ng aircraft, ng US aircraft. Sila biniblame na hindi nag-coordinate sa kanila. So, dapat, mga ahensya ng gobyerno, let us coordinate with each other para maiwasan yung mga ganyan.
Oo, hindi ba pwedeng sabihan din yung airport ng CAAP, DFA at DND? Tatlo na kayo, siguro naman isa sa inyo pwedeng tumimbre sa airport diretso. Yes, Yusek Ramwanga. I'd also like to recognize the representative of NSC, Deputy Director General Erico, as well as Yusek Madriaga of DND who just caught up. Yes, Yusek Ramwanga.
Ma'am, the clearance system all starts with the U.S. Embassy requesting DFA. There is a unit in DFA that issues permit clearances. This is the Intelligence and Security Unit. Pag na-clear na nila, ikakaskade nila yung mga yung mga clearance sa DND, sa AFP, sa CAAP.
Tapos hihinto ron, hindi aabot sa airport, dun sa bahay ng may-ari.
Hindi, we should recognize yung role also ng yung handler. Just like in Subic, meron silang tinatawag na husbanding agent. Dito sa sa airport, tinatawag nilang ground handler yon. In this case, sa airport, yung ground handler nila is Aegis, Aegis.
Aegis is the US Air Force handler, right?
Oh, yes ma'am. And ang binabayaran nito ng US Embassy. Ang trabaho nila is to make coordination. Kung sa Subic, yung husbanding agent will coordinate. Dito, yung Aegis will coordinate with the authorities already here at the the local airport. Makikita natin na
Yusek, right there, tamang-tama yung sinabi ninyo na galing sa US Embassy. The US Embassy admitted that due to a clerical error, some information provided for the flight RCH-192 clearance was incorrect. May we verify this with CAAP? Kasi ang US Embassy sabi, talagang mali yung information na binigay ng US. Admitido po nila na may mga mali doon.
Ma'am, we're not aware of any of these errors by the U.S. Embassy, except perhaps the absence of coordination with their ground handler. Because everything that we have
They
is in
admitted
order.
incorrect information because they had incomplete information themselves. That was what was provided to me.
I'm sorry, ma'am, we are not aware of the information that
So
was in
who's
error.
supposed to be the ground handler of this flight, the RCH-192? Aegis din, di ba? Totoo ba naglanding sa maling airstrip? Kasi ang pagkasabi ng American Embassy, miski yung lugar daw mali-mali.
If I may, ma'am, as far as the airport is concerned, tama po lahat. They departed Guam, and then the flight plan, which is here, landed Manila at a certain time. Ang nagka-problema lang kung saan sila magpa-park. Because, kasi yung Aegis is located
Yes.
at Palagba.
So it's the parking na
It's the parking ang mali.
Okay.
So we had no choice kasi nakakaharang siya but to have the aircraft taxi towards the
Tama. Kasi ang
remote.
tagal-tagal niya nakaharap dun
remote.
eh.
Oo.
Okay. Anyway, balikan lang natin si Manila International Airport. Who was supposed to be the ground handler? The usual Aegis.
Your Honor, in this case, nung dumating pa yung flight, but since we were not aware po, our ramp controllers were not aware na parating tong flight, we, by default, we tried to contact yung usual handler nila, which is Aegis Aviation. Pero nung kinontak namin sila while they're still waiting for their usual parking slot, Aegis said na parang walang advice po sa kanila. So that's why
So hindi alam ng ground handler.
ground handler po in the initial instance.
Ba yan?
So, ang nangyari po ma'am, the aircraft as said by Captain Tamayo, so that hindi po mag-traffic ang, kasi kung saan siya nakaparada, this is the taxiway going to T3
Pero
po.
nagtataka rin ako, ewan ko Senator Bato, pag nangyayari ito, you have an alien aircraft landing, ine-embargo yung aircraft at ina-aresto lahat ng laman, di ba? Lahat ng tao nasa loob, di ba? Hinihinto lahat yan kasi walang abiso.
Madam Chair, hindi naman ito hahantong sa ganun dahil
Oh, but
meron
it's a
naman silang mga,
general
general rule. Yeah.
As a general rule, if you have an aircraft that lands surreptitiously and without any notice, talaga naman na ihaharang yan.
Kaya nga, nagkagulo, hindi nagkaintindihan, no, ba?
Ang tagal
It goes,
yeah. Yes, you were saying.
Yes, Your Honor. The aircraft landed, pero wala,
Tapos yung ground handler didn't know
did not know po.
about the flight.
That's why our first protocol was to reposition the aircraft to another remote location. Kaya yun na po yung sinasabi po siguro ng US Embassy na nag-park sila sa ibang lugar from their usual place of parking doon po sa may Balagbag, which is near our maintenance hangar. So nilipat po sila sa RPA or Remote Bay number 24 at doon na sila nagtagal ng almost 10 hours. And at around 2 o'clock, tsaka po sinabihan kami ng Aegis Aviation that they were already advised by the US government to handle this flight.
Yung Aegis din.
Opo, yung Aegis din po.
Tulad nga ng sinabi ni Senator De La Rosa kanina, is it the fault of the ground handler? And if so, can we sanction him? Kasalanan ba ng ground handler? Ba't hindi niya alam ang nangyayari? Kaninong kasalanan to?
Ma'am, in this case po, it's we cannot ascertain if it's the ground handler that nagkamali na hindi tayo na-inform or baka hindi rin siya na-inform ng aircraft owner, which is the US government.
In that case, Madam Chair, I would like to take back my earlier statement advising NAIA to ban that handler from the airport dahil unfair naman sa kanila na hindi pala sinasabihan ng mga Amerikano ang details, hindi nila alam, tapos sila ngayon ang ipupult natin. Ipupult natin yung mga Amerikano. Sila may kasalanan, wala naman tayong magawa sa kanila. Pero yung handler na Pilipino, I would like to take back my statement. Kawawa naman. Maliit na negosyo lang yun. Tapos sabihin pa nila, pag-initan natin. So, okay na. Papapasukin mo ulit. Okay na. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hindi, ang tanong na lang dito, pwede ba yun? Hindi sinabihan ng US ang sarili lang handler. So, sino may kasalanan? Kasi hindi dapat maulit to. Kaya tayo nag-hearing to avoid the repetition of these errors. So, how do we ascertain that the correct information will be provided in a timely fashion to all parties concerned? I understand the requirement for confidentiality, pero sa kabila nun, dapat nagtitimbrehan naman tayo sa isa't isa. Dahil napakarami nito 500 exercises isipin natin Pabalik-balik ang eroplano niyan. Laging nagugulat yung mga airport. So, Ase Gonzaga, they're now saying that it's the US Air Force that should have told their own ground handler. And they didn't. So sisitahin ba natin ang US Air Force? Meron ba tayong kakayahan nun?
Ma'am, thank you, Madam
O
Chair.
yung mga VFA, kayo ang mananagot nito.
If I could just quickly say that 2 points po. One is, yes, we have already called the attention of the U.S. Embassy to this, and they have provided us assurances that they will try as much as possible not to make this happen again. I don't think anyone is in a position to say it's absolutely never going to happen again, but we definitely will be more vigilant in terms of monitoring and vetting all of these requests. Secondly po, I think we see the point that there's probably a need, maybe in particular for military flights, to ensure that the relevant airport authority is given advance notice. So we'll discuss that po in the context of the Presidential Commission on Visiting Forces and see if there are things we can do at least administratively on our side without having to change legislation. But if we find out...
Legislation required, it's just a procedure.
Yes, ma'am.
Para lang maging maayos, para hindi nagkakagulatan. So we want to make sure that these errors are avoided at hindi nagkakagulo sa NAIA, causing grave alarm for everyone and stopping traffic basically hanggang nahila yung eroplano dun sa mas malayong lugar. So how do we increase the monitoring also of the foreign military planes in this country? We should be better advised, no? At yung coordination siguro with the local airports is necessary. And the last few military aircraft from the U.S., both contracted and official U.S. Air Force, stopped in Manila on their way to Palawan, no? Or on their way to somewhere else. Is this absolutely necessary because of the quarantine, customs, and other requisites? Or can we do all of that at their final destination? We already know that NAIA is overburdened and
Traffic.
and has so much traffic. There's a long waiting period. Pwede bang gawin na itong kuan? Total may VFA naman talaga. Hindi ba pwedeng gawin na itong yung tinatawag natin na yung ating requisites for CIQ? Yung customs, immigration, and quarantine. Can the CIQ be done at the final destination para wala nang gulo?
Yeah, we'll discuss that also, Madam Chair, and if to the extent that it would be possible to readjust, we will do so po.
Yes, we're very familiar with the EDCA sites already and the VFA sites. Baka naman pwede na doon. Like it's being conducted in Lawag, right? There's CIQ in Lawag. That's clear. So why is it not possible to do it there? Why do they have to stop in Manila International? It's also confusing because we don't know what their true and final destination. Aside from the 3 military aircraft that landed in the country last July, how many more up to the present have been landing? Are we monitoring them at all? I mean, these are all past flights. If truth be told, it's no longer confidential.
Madam Chair, I don't have the figures with me right now, but our as Yusek Rambuanga was explaining, our intelligence and security unit should have the statistics in terms of the number of flights.
Yes, could we request, because we have more and more foreign exercises, including Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and the rest. Their airplanes are also seen coming in and out of our airports. Is it possible to get a list just to make sure that we're all forewarned of all these travels? Meron listahan? Oh, yes po.
Yes, Madam Chair. Deputy Director General Jerico of NSC. As a former member of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we do monitor the flights from the different countries, specifically that does military exercises at the AFP level. At the AFP command center level, we monitor it on a daily basis, Madam Chair.
Yes, not
So-
that you have to share all this information with us, but simply because it appears that many local airports do not seem aware of what's going on.
Yes, Madam Chair. We could also extend the information for the benefit of the local airport. But we were discussing earlier, for your question, if it is possible to conduct the CIQ, I believe it is possible to conduct on the international airport. But for some other airport that is not classified as international airport, which we don't have the agencies of the customs and immigrations and quarantine, they have to come into a port of entry for the conduct of CIQ, then to the other destination. Just like when we go abroad, Madam Chair, we have to be in a port of entry. Then we could move in intercontinental, Madam Chair. So I believe it could be possible, Mr.
Yes,
Madam.
I think it's possible given that this is going to be fairly frequent and we already know the sites. We know they'll be in Palawan. We know they'll be in Cagayan and Isabela. We know where it's going to happen. And you presumably have earlier knowledge. So we can organize a little bit better para hindi magulo. Yes, Yusek Rambuanga.
Ma'am, this omnibus implementing rules and regulation has been in existence for 8 years already. And all from pre-entry, entry, on-site, departure, lahat nandito eh. If the offices described here will just do their part, hindi tayo magkakaroon ng problema. Nandito yan eh.
Yes, sir. Then who is not doing his part? Right now, as we speak. Who is not doing his part? What particular agency? Kaya andito tayo ngayon to correct. I-correct natin. To improve it. Di ba, Madam Chair? Oo. So, ano sir, mayroon kang alam na hindi nagagawa ng kanyang trabaho sa agencies concerned?
May I say something, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yusek
Madam
Espino wants to
Chair,
interject, yes.
Good afternoon po. To avoid future confusion, we will probably request JUSMAG to strengthen their coordinations with other agencies. Because as process is concerned, everybody in the department follow the process from the receipt of the request up to the time the diplomatic clearance is given. We follow the process. But in the ground level, there was poor coordination. So we will coordinate with JUSMAG to strengthen the coordinations with other agencies of, especially
Yes,
now that we have plenty of military aircrafts arriving in the country.
Yes, sir. Madam Chair, wala man tayong problema sa mga ahensya ng gobyerno. Lahat mga coordinated, alam nila. Ang problema ngayon doon nga sa ground handler, which is not a government agency. Ngayon, itong ground handler na ito, sabi nga ng MIA din na hindi rin nabigyan ng impormasyon. So may kasalanan talaga ito, yung Amerikano, yung US Air Force o whatever, sila kasi hindi nila inupormahan yung ground handler. Now, maintindihan rin natin na since itong ground handler is not security classified na tao, dahil mga civilian ito, baka kulang rin ng tiwala yung mga Amerikano, nasabihan kagad sila dahil alam nila ang China nagmumonitor sa movement ng American military aircraft. So yun, diyan nangyari ang bottleneck ngayon. Nag-iingat sila, that caused the problem. So maintindihan rin natin ang Amerikano. Being our ally, maintindihan natin sila na they exercise maximum confidentiality in all their movements. Kaya hindi sila nagsabi doon sa civilian na ground handler, baka mag-leak at malaman na naman ng China. Yung pag-resupply nga natin ng pagkain sa mga marines natin sa BRP Sierra Madre, alam nga ng China eh. Kaya mag-ingat rin tayo. Diba? So yun lang, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yes, salamat. Pero I just wanted to cite kay Yusef Kramwanga, no? Ito nga, may mga rules na dapat i-comply, no? At ito nga, there's the issue here, I think, General Erico. Ito nga yung problema. Kasi hindi naman final destination yung NAIA. It wasn't the final destination. Puerto Princesa was the final destination. Kaya siguro yung sinabihan, yung final, hindi yung hihintuan. Pero we do have in our rules, as it turns out, the Section 518.3, entry and departure of foreign military aircraft and or vessels shall be made only at international or designated airports and seaports. Pero pwede talaga basta na designate, mutually designated, where proper CIQ inspection can be conducted. So I think that's the concern. Perhaps the transit CIQ was not relayed to either NAIA or the ground handler, but the final destination, they were aware, was Puerto Princesa. So let's try and figure this out kasi this requires a great deal of coordination and we don't want this to be repeated. Yes, Mr. Ko.
Yes, Madam Chair. We would like to share also, of course, together with CAAP, we informed that if we could possibly hold the port of entry and exit of these exercises instead of Manila, maybe pag-aralan kung pwedeng sa Clark, because as you've mentioned, Manila is already a very congested airport and ang pagdating nila at any time of the day and sometimes during the peak hours really affect our commercial operation. So if it can be considered also, if walang international port of entry sa final destination, baka pwede pong instead of Manila na sobrang ng congested, we can consider Clark po.
Tama, there are other alternatives. There are so many EDCA sites in the north. They can all go through Lawag. There are so many, there's also other EDCA sites in Central Luzon. Clark seems to be the obvious answer. So I believe that's the alternative. There's also Cebu and so many others. So at all costs, we should try to avoid this. Perhaps I will then request from the VFA group, constituted by DFA, DND, as well as by the CAAP. gawa kayo ng bagong procedure para naintindihan natin at hindi nagkakabulilyaso. Kahit simple lang, at least yung step by step naintindihan ng lahat. At walang gulatan sa mga airport sa probinsya. So, may magbibigay sa atin yan? Yung BFA, sino ba? Kayo? So Yusef Rambuanga, it doesn't have to be as copious as this, but certainly we need to come out with a procedure that's more thorough and convenient to follow.
Actually, lahat ng mga agencies involved should have their own implementing rules and regulations. Sinabi namin, gawin nyo yung para pag merong mangyayari sa inyong area, meron kayong checklist. Pero as of now, only PNP came up with their own implementing rules and regulations. So that's what we will follow up next time. Even the armed forces do not have an implementing rules and regulation. Only PNP.
Pakiulit, sir.
Senator
Pakiulit.
De La Rosa, ba't gano'n?
Pakiulit, sir.
The Philippine National Police.
Pakiulit pa, sir. Pakiulit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Music to his ears, Senator De La Rosa. Music to his ears. For a change, may magandang balita tungkol sa pulis. Panalo. Yes. Okay. Yes, Asa Gonzaga.
Ma'am, sorry, Madam Chair. I know we have two other resolutions to talk about, but if I can just put on the records for the committee's appreciation, the process right now, we take fully the comments of the committee on what might be done to make it better. But if I can just put on the record that right now there is really tight coordination between all of the agencies in terms of giving the diplomatic clearance. So it's initiated by a note verbal from the diplomatic mission, whether it's a
Wala
yes or
bang
not.
problema sa diplomatic clearance yung administrative clearances.
Opo, but
malabo.
I think what we're looking at is putting the MIA and the other airport authorities as part of that process which we have now.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
yeah,
That seems to be the
yun po
problem.
ang ano.
And also, if I may suggest, if there's really an issue with ground handling, they should be put on alert also that they are part of this process
Yes, ma'am.
and will be sanctioned.
Yep. And to the extent that we are coordinating with the embassies, we are also constantly reminding them not to make these incidents happen again.
Yes, thank you very much. That's
Thank
a
you.
relief for all of us. And okay, with that, I will
Madam
await.
Chair, before we change topic, Madam Chair, just would like to commend the DFA for being brave enough to call out the United States to correct the mistakes. Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oo naman, it's in the interest of everyone that these are conducted as orderly and expeditiously as possible. So, with that, I shall await the quick report from the VFA group, from the Presidential Commission, even if it's only in bullet points format so that we can resolve the issues that were raised in this resolution. Okay?
Yes, ma'am, we will do that.
Opo. Okay, so maliban dito, we now have the resolution from Senator Tolentino regarding SEATO. And perhaps the DFA, who already commented on this, will be the first to brief us. I'd like to acknowledge also the presence of Senator Padilla here. Yes, Asek Gonzaga, will you be the one?
Yes,
Talking
Madam
about
Chair,
this.
thank you. For this particular resolution, I'm going to request the acting head of our Office of Treaties and Legal Affairs, Mr. Russell Reyes, to provide initial comments on the part of DFA po.
Yes, is that Mr. Russell Reyes?
Magandang hapon po to the esteemed members of the committee. With regard to the Senate resolution filed by the esteemed senator, the department respectfully reiterates its position that was submitted last 2021 that for all intents and purposes, SEATO or the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization has ceased to exist.
That's right. But having said that, the contention of Senator Tolentino is despite the demise of the SEATO as we know it, as we knew it, the SEATO Defense Manila Pact continues to exist. What is your position?
We do understand the position of the esteemed senator, considering that in the Manila Pact, there is a specific procedure for canceling the treaty, which is each member should issue a denunciation of the treaty. But under the Vienna Convention under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, there are two possible ways wherein which a treaty can be cancelled, so to speak. First is that it can be terminated by way of conforming with the provisions of the specific treaty, or at any time by consent of all the parties after consultation with the other contracting states. In the case po of the Manila Pact, the records show that in the last meeting in 1975, the countries or the council reviewed the events in the treaty area in that year, and they considered the role of SEATO in light of the new situation in the Southeast Asian region, while noting that the organization had over the years made a useful contribution to stability and development in the region. They decided that in view of the changing circumstances, it should now be phased out. So, ang department po is of the view that an international organization, being the creation of a multilateral treaty, derives its status and its competence from that treaty. So SEATO derives its status from the Manila Pact. And that organization cannot act contrary to the Constitution, which is the treaty itself. Any vital change in the status of the organization, such as the termination of its international personality, is in the nature of a revision or abolition of the treaty itself, for which the consent of the contracting parties is required. So, in this case po, we understand the esteemed senator's position that the treaty may still be in effect because two parties to the treaty, specifically the United States and New Zealand, continue to label the treaty as still in effect. But the other members, such as the Philippines, Pakistan, I think, and the UK, for example, they do not list Philippines, Australia, the UK, and Thailand. So, sorry for the error. They all do not list the treaty in their respective treaty indices, but only the United States and New Zealand continue to do so up to this time, Your Honors.
Okay, Senator Risa Ontiveros, please.
Salamat, Madam Chair. Magandang hapon sa lahat. Actually, Madam Chair, I was grateful to be reminded by Sen. Francis na buhay pa pala itong SEATO na to. Hindi ko, well, but it's like a shadow of its former self dahil meron pa palang 4 na bansa who, though SEATO has been disbanded, yung 4 na yon, they still recognize the Manila Pact or a Southeast Asia Collective Defense Treaty. 4 pala.
Dalawa.
Dalawa lang? Alin na lamang po? Okay. My research included kasi the UK, and I thought you mentioned Thailand, sir. Sorry, my mistake. Pero recently, nireiterate ng New Zealand yung suporta nila for navigation, freedom of navigation, saka overflight in and beyond the South China Sea in accordance with the UNCLOS. Tapos si Australian ambassador naman also reiterated his country's commitment to support, quote, the outcome of the arbitral award and supporting the Philippines as it goes forward dealing with different or difficult regional issues. And nitong August 6, Madam Chair, dinecry ng UK yung incident sa Ayungin Shoal. So, ang isang follow-up question ko, Madam Chair, appropriate time ba ngayon para pag-usapan yung isang bagong multilateral agreement with like-minded countries in the region, perhaps patterned on the SEATO or taking inspiration, say, from the ASEAN or from the Quad? Kasi yung ibang mga bansa na dati o hanggang ngayon kumikilala sa Manila Pact are a member of one or both of those formations. So a new multilateral agreement to provide for our collective security, ensure the continued stability of the region, and safeguard the existing rules-based international order. So may halaga po ba yun?
As reiterated by our secretary himself, the Philippines has adopted a foreign policy of being a friend to everyone and enemy to no one. So we believe that we are open to any proposals for such an arrangement, for such a treaty, as long as it serves the interests of the Philippines. So at that point po, again, we believe that we are open to receiving such a proposal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, by way of follow-up to Senator Ontiveros, the reality is that while we have constant ASEAN defense meetings, ang totoo, walang nakasulat kasi sa Treaty of Amity and Cooperation ng ASEAN hinggil sa external aggression and other threats. Ang nakasulat lamang sa ASEAN is hindi siya defense treaty o military alliance. Napakaliwanag niyan sa ASEAN. Kahit nagmi-meeting, panay ang meeting ng ating mga defense minister. Alam naman natin may grupong ganon. Pero ang laging sinasabi from Article 9, 10, 11, 13, prevent disputes and foster amity, peace, harmony, stability in the region. Pero wala kailanman sinasabi tungkol sa military alliance. At eto ang wala sa ASEAN pero maliwanag sa SEATO. So palagay ko ang pakay ni Senator Tolentino ay maliwanag na sana magkaroon ng military alliance din sa ASEAN. Kasi sa ngayon wala silang obligasyon tumulong sa atin. Pero yung SEATO, alam naman natin, kagagawa ng mga Amerikano noong panahon ng gera sa Vietnam, sila ang nagpondo at ito ay tutol sa komunismo na hindi na angkop sa panahon ngayon. Pero yung issue ng magkakaroon ng isang multilateral alliance dito sa ASEAN ay isa sa dapat pag-usapan, hindi po ba? Lalo't ang dami natin ng mga co-claimants, yung Vietnam, yung Malaysia, Indonesia, maraming co-claimants sa South China or West Philippine Sea. Kaya't ito yata ang interest natin na magkaroon ng military alliance. Any input from the DND or our other senators?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Bato.
si Mr. Rosel Reyes. So, right now, we can categorically say na SEATO is dead.
With regard to
By all intents and purposes,
organization, yes, sir. Yes, Your Honor.
dead. So kung tayo'y magsusumikap na buhayin yon, ano ba, magmukha ba tayong kawawa? Sabihan itong dalawa, yung US at saka New Zealand, uy, buhayin naman natin na SEATO. Buhayin natin.
Kailangan yata
Kailangan?
bago.
Ha?
Bago na lang.
Bago na lang.
Oo.
Huwag na yung SEATO.
Kasi yung SEATO nakaka-nervous naman kasi
Dead na.
at higit sa lahat, kagagawan lang ng Amerikano yon para magkaisa laban sa
Komunismo.
Vietnam. Oo.
Komunismo.
Eh hindi na angkop ngayon, samantalang marami tayong miyembro sa ASEAN.
Tama. Okay, that's outlive.
So,
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you.
Madam Chair, pwede mo
Sa Senator Tulfo.
since may pupuntahan pa kasi akong hearing sa kabila, hindi pa ako nakapagsalita doon.
Yes,
At
please.
pinag-uusapan nila yung defense, ano po. And I saw na the presence of the DFA and the defense. Yesterday, doon sa privilege speech ni Senator, no, not Senator Jinggoy, but Robin Padilla, nakita ko doon na mention niya yung about sa BRP Sierra Madre, and I saw the sorry state of that ship. Now, this BRP Sierra Madre, it serves as a permanent station for Philippine military personnel to deploy to protect and secure Philippine rights and interests. Nakita ko po bulok, sobrang pagkabulok na ng barko, at siguro isang malakas lang na bagyo, baka liliparin na yon. Ang tanong ko po sa ating DFA at DND, ano ba ang balak nila doon? Hanggang gano'n lang ba? Hayaan ba natin kakalawa ngayon hanggang sa tuluyang bumigay? O may plano tayong i-repair yun o palitan ng bago? Yun lang naman ang tanging protection na lang meron tayo para pagpilitan or yung ating claim doon sa Ayungin Shoal. panindigan yung ating claim sa Ayungin Shoal. Is there anybody who would like to answer my question from the DFA and DND? Ano bang balak? Anong plano? Walang plano, walang gusto magsalita. Kaya siguro walang plano.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Espino, you're recognized.
yeah, thank you, sir. We can give you clearer answers in an executive session.
Executive session.
Yes, sir.
Okay. At pangalawang
Yeah.
tanong na lang po. Pangalawang suggestion.
Yes, we
Um,
will schedule that ASAP
Okay.
in order to derive the information required by Senator.
I read an article pertaining to the suggestion of dating Chief Justice Carpio, if I'm not mistaken, and his suggestion was para hindi na tayo palagi nabubuli yung ating militar ng China sa West Philippine Sea, lalo na yung pagdadala ng supply sa kanilang mga tropa sa Ayungin Shoal. Wala bang violation doon sa kanyang suggestion kung i-escortan ng US personnel, US ships, yung pagdi-deliver lang, pag-resupply lang doon sa mga tropa sa Ayungin Shoal? Kasi ginagawa din naman yon ng bansang Indonesia and Malaysia na much bigger than our country, na mas capable of defending themselves kumpara sa atin. Is that a possibility? Na wala ba tayong babaylit na batas? Meron naman tayong tinatawag na Mutual Defense Treaty with the US. And maybe doon na sa pag-resupply, hihingi tayo ng tulong sa Amerika. Ito ay ayon kay Carpio ako. And sabi ko, baka pwedeng pag-usapan yon. Is that a possibility? Is that doable?
Yes, sir. It's a possibility, sir. And we are actually exploring all possibilities, all options regarding the RORE, regarding the rotation and the supply of our personnel to Yungin. And as of now, we can still handle the situation. Your Honor.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Ontiveros, please.
Actually, may mga dalawa pa akong tanong about SEATO. But it's okay, Madam Chair, dahil nadako din po tayo sa BRP Sierra Madre at yung Ayungin Shoal, if I could continue in that line of questioning. So without going into specifics po, which could be discussed maybe also in that executive session, Madam Chair, may factual basis po ba sa mga ulat na baka may saboteurs o informants na nag-ooperate sa loob ng Pilipinas na sumusuporta dun sa illegitimate policy ng Chinese government sa West Philippine Sea? I think I heard this also, Madam Chair, from a statement of the PCG spokesperson, Commodore Tariela, na yung Chinese government parang mukhang may advanced knowledge sa ating resupply missions sa Ayungin. At baka daw may informants, Chinese informants sa Pilipinas. Is there anything that Yusek Espino and or Commodore Tariela could tell in open hearing, Madam Chair?
Madam Chair, that is a possibility, but of course, we are always thinking that during the loading of supplies, there are already informants in the areas where we load our supplies before the RORE, before the operations is conducted. So, nakakakuha na po sila ng mga inputs doon and information.
Salamat, Yusek, Madam Chair. Related yung sagot nila dun sa follow-up question ko na paano nga ba na yung mga Chino na i-intercept yung ating mga resupply missions? Halimbawa, sa dami ng mga ships nila dun sa palibot ng Ayungin, could that situation in fact be described already as a blockade?
Yes, Madam Chair. At any one time, there are a daily presence of about 80 to 200 militia ships and China Coast Guards presence in the area. So even if we escort our vessels, our private vessels supplying the necessary requirements of ayungin, hindi po tayo, we could hardly counter the number of vessels from China. We have, normally we escort one Coast Guard and one Navy ship every time we conduct the RORE. But the Chinese, they have at least three main Chinese ship and plenty of Coast Guards, plus the militia ships presence in the area.
Salamat, Yusek, Madam Chair. In fact, naalala ko po sa confirmation hearing ng isang opisyal natin sa Armed Forces of the Philippines. At that time, the gentleman described the swarming as akin to a phalanx. At kahit po sa aming mga civilian, alam namin ang phalanx military tactic or formation yan. So to hear of 80 to 200 hostile Chinese vessels conducting such operations around Ayungin, talaga it's a cause for grave concern. Tapos bakit po na-intercept itong huling resupply and rotation mission? Dahil ba mabagal yung chinarter natin na barko? How do we ensure that the People's Liberation Navy, the Chinese Coast Guard, and the Chinese Maritime Militia are unable to unlawfully intercept or interfere with our operations in the area?
Madam Chair, if I may, in relation to
Yes.
the question of Senator Risa, siguro sir, ang sagot siguro doon, there's no way we can stop them. Dahil meron silang satellite na nagmumonitor sa lahat ng movement dyan sa West Philippines eh. Pag malaman nila na hindi kanilang barko yung pumapasok dyan, pwede naman, madali lang sila magpa-intercept, di ba? So, wala talaga, wala. There's no way na masasabi natin na ma-stop yung kanilang pangaharang. Dahil malaman talaga, kahit hating gabi tayo, sabihin nyo, gabi tayo, ranger operations. Gabi tayo papasok doon para hindi nila malaman. Monitor pa rin yan sa satellite nila, yung movement natin. So, kung bubulihin tayo anytime, mabubuli talaga tayo doon. Bubuhos natin ng tubig doon. Kaya nga, sabi ko kaninang umaga doon sa hearing sa DBCC, yung 4.9% of the national budget ng Pilipinas na dedicated to the defense sector, napakaliit yun sa lahat ng sa lahat ng budget, yun ang pinakamaliit, 4.9%. Sabi ko, dagdagan natin konti para yung Coast Guard, malagyan lang natin na kahit na malaking, yung malaking cannon, water cannon, para pag tinubig sila ng China, tubigin rin natin. Lumaban kayo, huwag kayong pabayaan lang yung tutubigin kayo. Lumaban rin kayo, lagyan natin ng malaking, ng malaking water cannon yung barko nila. Para kawawa na ng Coast Guard natin. Wala tayo, anong advice may bigay natin sa kanila? Yun lang palagi, Madam Chair. Sabihin natin, oh, you exercise maximum restraint. Oh, you exercise, patience is a virtue. Sige, iwas lang kayo ng iwas dyan. Kapag binumba kayo, iwas. Kawawa naman yung Coast Guard natin. O tayo, my heart is bleeding. Kapag gano'n na lang palagi ang ating maibigay na advice. Why not advise the economic managers na dagdagan ninyo yung pundo ng defense natin, kaliit ng defense.
Tama.
Napakaliit. Thank you,
Tama,
Madam Chair.
Talagang nakikita naman natin na lahat halos sa region, lahat sa buong mundo, pati Europa, nagdadagdag talaga ng defense spending. Hindi talaga maiwasan. Sa ngayon, I believe, Senator Risa, by way of answer, ang alam natin, di ba yung US, nagbigay ng $200 million. Saan kaya ginastos yun? Pero ang alam ko, ang priority nila, mismo yun, yung drone communications, yung drone and other satellite communications. Ganon din, tayo yung first recipient ng Japan ng communications and radar. So ito yung at least maasahan natin, umpisa tayo. Pero at the end of the day, ang tunay na depensa self-reliance talaga. Kailangan meron tayong sarili.
I agree, Madam Chair. And kahit dun sa executive session, if the USEC and the other resource persons and agencies ay gustong payuhan yung ating komite, I think USEC, you will find a wide base of support here in the Senate. And ito related po ito sa iba kong mga tanong, Madam Chair, pati sa ibang mga resolution natin. Maigi na hindi tayo kaalyado sa iisa lang, mas marami. Hindi lang US, hindi lang pagpilian tayo between US and China, pero lahat ng pwede nating makaalyado para sa rule of law kahit sa dagat, sa ilalim ng UNCLOS. Kaya Madam Chair, yung interest ko sa yung isang reso pa natin, yung pag-review at kung ano man sa MDT at yung baka hindi pa naubos na potential sa SEATO na arrangement, Madam Chair. Salamat.
Yeah. Dahil dito nga, sana Senator Bato at si Senator Ontiveros, abala tayo dito sa Senator Padilla. Akala ko silog. Hindi, binibiro ko ng seatmate ko. At dahil dito, sana usisiin natin mabuti yung budget na dinagdag sa modernization ngayon. Kasi medyo nadidismaya ako sa Horizon 1, 2, and 3. Hindi matapos-tapos, isa na yung problemang yun. Ikalawa, yung problema pa, halos walang technology transfer sa Pilipino. Lahat imported ng imported. We're basically shooting ourselves in the foot. In the past, we were already doing our own ammo. We in fact fired several rockets, bong-bong rockets at that time. And we had all sorts of vehicles that were manufactured in the Philippines. Ngayon, wala na tayong ginawa. Yung mga mini cruiser na, lahat tayo nag-aral mag-drive sa mini cruiser. Lahat yan, wala na, di ba? Kasi imported na. Dahil meron tayo sa batas, requirement that it should have been used in 2 other armed forces. So even the machine guns and other very basic equipment that we can well produce in the Philippines, we are buying from Korea and elsewhere. It's a really depressing situation. Patras tayo kayang-kaya ng Pilipino gawin pero ini-import pa dahil sa sariling batas. Ano ba naman to? Dapat i-amend sa lalong madaling panahon kasi nakakatawa tinignan ko kasi out of 154 Horizon contracts, let's say 154 more or less yon ng mga kontrata under the Horizon program, dadalawa lang ang may technology transfer na dito gagawin sa Pilipinas o tuturuan ang Pilipino. Yung Israeli, yung sa Navy. Yun lang yun. Yung iba lahat, basta imported sa labas. Samantalang may arms corps, may international. Di ba marami naman tayo dito na nag-export. Yun ang nakakatuwa.
We are being prevented by our own laws. So we have to amend these laws, Madam Chair. Mabilisan natin ngayon. Ang gaganda, alam mo hindi. Yung mga bagong rifles ngayon ng Arms Corps na gawa, ang ganda. Naputok ko, ang ganda. Bakit tayo bibili pa ng made in Korea, made in Israel? Ang ganda ng produkto natin sa Arms Corps. Pero yung batas natin ang nagpipigil. So ayusin natin yan. At beneficial pa sa atin dahil atin talaga yan. Ating mga tao nagtatrabaho. So our economy is will benefit from that.
Yes, I think we have to be like Thailand and India. They've even adapted it to local situations. They've tropicalized a lot of the guns. They've even in Thailand reduced the size so that it's exactly the size of an Asian hand and so on and so forth. Parang binagay nila sa sitwasyon nila. Yun ang maganda sana.
Kaya Madam Chair, before we leave that topic, tanungin natin itong DND. Okay ba kayo dyan? Na ganun gagawin natin?
Localized.
Kaya nga, all dapat, alam nga naman kami magpupumilit dito sa Senado na ito, we will ram down your throats. Ito gusto namin. Dapat ang proposal manggagaling sa inyo, end users. Sir, tulungan nyo kami. Ganito nga dapat, ganun. Dapat sa inyo manggaling. Kayo, takot ata kayo sa ibang mga ahensya ng gobyerno. Ayaw ninyong i-insert yung, i-insist yung inyong yung pangangailangan. Gumawa kayo ng bold move na kami dito naman, Alangan, magkonsensya rin kami. Bakit natin pangungunahan yung AFP, yung DND? Hindi naman nila kailangan yan dahil hindi pa sila nagsasabi. Di ba? Kayo, use your mind, use your, para pampa-improve natin ito. Kawawa yung mga tao natin doon sa binubuli lang tayo palagi. Anong bang gawin natin dito? Hanggang iyak na lang tayo. Iiyak na lang tayo. Wala tayong magawa. Galing sa inyo. Pag sinabi nyo, sir, yung defense budget, palakihan natin dapat. Dating dito sa Senado, hanapan namin ng paraan na para ma-increase yan kunti. Kahit papaano. Pwede mo tayo alam mo na.
Marami kayong kakampi.
Kami. Lahat kami dito.
Yes, Senator.
Kami dito.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Kampi ninyo. Oh, sa totoo lang ha, sa totoo lang.
We will do that, Your Honor.
Meron lang po akong maiksing tanong, Madam Chair. Opo, pwede pong tanongin lang kung sino po ba ang nagdidesisyon kung may magbibigay po sa atin ng aid, foreign aid dyan, foreign military aid. Sino po ang nagdidesisyon? Sila po o tayo? Kung ano yung hihingin natin, ibibigay nila. Katulad po narinig ko kanina, Japan nagbigay ng communication. Sino? Sino po ba ang nagdidesisyon nun? Tayo? Hihingin po natin o sila ang magsasabi, bibigay namin to. Ano?
Kadalasan, sir, binibigay na lang nila.
Alam nila.
Alam nilang kailangan natin. Yes, sir.
So communication po, bibigay po nila.
Opo, sir. Yeah.
Safe naman po yun.
Yes, sir.
Tanggapin natin yun.
Yes, sir.
Communication, naririnig din nila kaya tayo?
After, sir, just this morning, we were talking to one of the suppliers, and they're willing to transfer technology to us.
Okay po. Opo. Isa na lang po uling tanong. Halimbawa po, may magbibigay sa atin ng mga second hand na gamit nila, aeroplano, mga helicopter, tatanggapin po ba natin yun?
Madam Chair, beggars,
Yeah.
Senator Rubin,
Ito na lang, Rosa. Oo.
beggars cannot be choosy. Di ba? Anong meron kayo? Sige. Bigay nyo, tanggapin namin yan. Di ba? Pero, yun nga, kung bigay. Pero kung bibilhin, again, you are being limited by the procurement law. Di ba? May problema tayo. Pero kung bigay, tanggapin natin. Sayang din.
Kung bigay po, tatanggapin natin.
Yes, sir.
Opo. Wala naman pong ano po yun. Wala naman pong deal. Natatanggapin natin yung bigay,
Yes, sir.
pero sa kanila tayo bibili ng pyesa. Hindi naman po kaya ganun.
Kung gano'n po, sir, medyo baka may problema tayo. Baka mas mahal naman yung pyesa kaysa sa binigay nila.
Opo, yun lang po yung mga gusto kong itanong
Yes, sir.
kasi
But,
parang minsan binigyan ka nga ng sasakyan, mas mahal naman yung pyesang binebenta.
or wala pong supplies.
Opo.
Walang,
Opo. Yun lang po, ano lang po lang ako, nagtanong lang po ako tungkol sa mga aid. Maraming salamat po.
Madam Chair.
thanks, sir.
Yes, Senator Ontiveros.
Isang follow-up lang dun sa tanong ni Sen. Robin. So, kaya po nyo binuo yung AFP Modernization Program, di ba? Yung 3 horizons na sinabi ni Chair. Para may framework din po kami sa pagbuo ng mga supportive policies. And yung isa pong lagi naming naririnig sa inyo, yung isang layunin nyo, makaabot tayo sa strategic defense posture. Na konektado din sa pinag-uusapan, anong klaseng aid ang hihingiin or tatanggapin, yung domestic production ng mga kakailanganin natin for national defense. So, at least yun po yung pinaka-pwede namin kirignan na gabay. Ano po? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair.
Salamat. Okay, we have a last item on the agenda. Wait first. Meron pa. Sec
Yeah.
Gonzaga.
I just, sorry, Madam Chair, I just wanted to contribute a small footnote. It's really related to the last comments of Senator Risa and Senator Padilla. As we think together, executive and legislative, about how you can be supportive of the defense modernization plans, I just wanted to mention that we probably can track that with the ongoing discussions we have with the United States on what we're trying to do, a security sector assistance roadmap for the AFP. So that one, we're matching the needs of the AFP with the capabilities that they can provide. So I think we will all just bear that in mind as we work together. Thank you.
Madam Chair, baka maganda ASEC, hindi lang sa US magamit itong roadmap, pero lahat ng mga whether treaty allies or basta mga allies natin sa sabihin nating rule of law sa katagatan.
Opo. That has been
Wala tayong
recommended po,
kakawin, dapat
and we're
bukas sa lahat
definitely going to pursue that. Thank you.
It should be noted also that the Foreign Investment Act has been amended. And among the key amendments is the defense manufacture requirement that it only be that all production should only be for export. As it stands today, it doesn't necessarily have to be for export any longer. Therefore, if you can attract investors in the defense industry, including communications, radar, vectronics, and others, which was what we were doing in the past, it would be very, very helpful, at least for deterrence and other capabilities. Sana maayos natin yun. At nabuksan na, nasa Foreign Investment Act na bago yan eh. Pwede tayo mag-attract ng mga bagong mga manufacturers dito sa Pilipinas. Okay, with regard to the SEATO, therefore, it's the, yes, Senator Ortiveros.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Last two questions na lang po tungkol sa SEATO. So, may strategic advantages po ba sa pagpasok sa ganyang klaseng mga multilateral security arrangements kumpara sa bilateral lang na arrangements sa ating mga allies at partners?
Madam Senator, I think our policy offices are in a better position to answer the question po. Maraming salamat.
Okay, Yusek Siriban.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and distinguished members of the committee. Yes, Your Honor, I think there are bilateral arrangements. Of course, we have a number of them, but I think multilateral engagements can be force multipliers. That they are, if we are able to, as what Secretary Manalo reiterated many times, we are always open to working with as many partners as possible, not just with traditional partners, but with non-traditional partners as well. And we have been doing that, starting to do that in recent years.
Ang tingin ko, Madam Chair, yung isang maganda pa sa force multipliers, hindi lang na namumultiply nila yung force natin. Pero these kinds of multilateral formations enable us to build unities among the different partners and allies. Kahit dun sa iba or kahit sa bawat isa sa kanila, we may also have issues with them. Pero kapag magkasundo on common principles, halimbawa nga rule of law in the sea based on UNCLOS, then at least binding yon and pwedeng mabalanse yung conflicts that naturally come up from time to time kung sa mga individual nga na tao, kahit sa mga bansa. Just a last question, Madam Chair, about SEATO. Ano po yung magiging parameters or posibleng parameters ng ganyang klaseng multilateral regional security arrangement? Or masyado bang maaga? May mga broad strokes bang nasa imahinasyon ng DFA?
Maybe, Madam Chair, if you allow us more time to look at it in more detail. Of course, when SEATO was originally conceptualized, it was against the communist threat in the 70s. Of course,
particularly Russia, kasi 1954 pa.
The situation has changed, and of course, we have to titignan ho natin, ma'am, what kind of elements can go into this kind of multilateral arrangements.
Salamat, Madam Chair. And then, Deputy Yusek, as far as able, baka pwede niyong i-advise kami sa komite through our chair kung ano yung thinking ng department about this. Salamat po.
Yes, Madam.
Yes, apropos of a defense pact, which at this point is unlikely in ASEAN, given everybody's different affiliations. What's the progress on the code of conduct? At least yun, matatapos ba natin yan? Ang bang balita yan? Parang natulog na yan forever.
Well, ma'am, actually, yung sa code of conduct, Madam Chair, the discussions are continuing. Actually,
wala bang deadline? Kasi I recall before the pandemic, meron tayong deadline eh. inaasahan na August of 20 whatever, 2020 may lalabas. Tapos na pandemic, tapos na isang tabi. Tapos hindi na pinag-uusapan. Although the other week I heard something that I read somewhere that there was some kind of uptick in discussions. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, Manila, the Philippines will be holding the latest round of negotiations of the Code of Conduct in August. We are working closely.
It's August.
Yes,
It's
ma'am,
August
it's
now.
August.
So when is it going to happen?
Next week, ma'am. Next week. So, this is the latest round, and hopefully also we are working with the chair and with the ASEAN colleagues in China to narrow differences and to try to come up with a if not a time frame, but to try to come up with more definitive milestones para ho mas malapit ho tayo sa pagpirma ng Code of Conduct.
Okay, so that's a valued first step. I don't know what the Philippine position is, but I think there were some members who wanted a more stringent and legalistic code of conduct, and others who wanted a more liberal, open-ended one. I recall that was the split and the delay. In any case, let's move on with the SEATO. I have in hand already the DFA opinion that it's only a technicality if it exists at all, and that in fact we have to rely on ASEAN because SEATO is no longer there. But in fact, the opinions raised are certainly valuable, that a defense pact among our neighbors would probably be something we should explore in so far as it is possible. Okay, lipat tayo sa MDT, ang 1951, 19 kopong-kopong na kasunduan ng Pilipinas at ng US. Ang katotohanan, napakaraming mutual defense treaty ng Amerika sa iba't ibang bansa. Hindi lang tayo, pero eto nga, andito nga yung resolution ni Senator Tolentino na naman na i-expand yung definition ng metropolitan territory at may payment at itabi yung definition ng gera para madagdagan ng cyber attack. Okay, pero in the meantime, I am aware that nung Mayo, nagkaroon ng bilateral defense guidelines. Is that correct, SND? There were new guidelines that were established with key priorities to deepen cooperation and interoperability, land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace that probably already respond to the resolution of Senator Tolentino. Dahil alam naman natin ang MDT at ang anumang treaty napakahirap ipasa sa US, pati dito sa Pilipinas. Ang ginawa, nagkaroon tayo ng bilateral defense guidelines nung Mayo. Tapos, itong alyansan to has now become not only a military partnership, instead it's now a comprehensive strategic alliance. Nag-level up siya, di ba? So the wording is that an armed attack in the Pacific to include anywhere in the South China Sea on either Philippine or U.S. armed forces, including both nations' Coast Guard, aircraft, or public vessels will invoke mutual defense commitments. So maliwanag na yon. Hindi katulad dati kasi depende sa administrasyon sa Amerika. Minsan sasabihin na yes, minsan hindi tama. So ngayon mas maliwanag. They will come to our defense. But it does not create rights or obligations under international or domestic law and can be modified as deemed necessary. So in theory, it has the flexibility to modernize, which perhaps the MDT is not able to do very quickly. So may coordination, and there's mention now of both conventional, non-conventional domain, taking into account asymmetric, hybrid, irregular warfare, gray zone tactics na nabanggit kanina sa swarming, at pati na rin artificial intelligence. Meron ring information sharing at hindi pa rin natin napapasa yung General Security of Military Information Agreement. Yung GSOMIA, matagal nang inaantay ng Amerika yan eh. Tapos yung Security Assistance Roadmap. I think you made reference to that earlier, Asek Gonzaga. And interoperable defense platforms from FMF and FMS and excess defense articles. Pero sana wag naman puro bulok na truck, ano? And then deepen cooperation with EDCA, expand cooperation maritime security, National Coast Watch, civic action programs, eto na yung disaster and humanitarian. So, develop air defense capability. Kaya lang ayaw nila magbigay ng F-12, hanggang drone lang daw. Paano kaya yung air defense na yun? Ewan ko ba. And then, combat transnational non-conventional threat, improve cyber defense and cyber security. Okay, so ito yung update, ano? At yung EDCA sites, ano, na I think binibilisan na yung construction sa original original 5 sites and even in the 4 new sites. No, so yes, and I think the latest development was August 10 when the Chinese ambassador was called by the DFA to tell China very firmly to direct its vessels to stop their illegal action against Filipino vessels. Beijing responded with the offer to dialogue, but the request that Philippines should meet halfway. Okay, so perhaps we can begin with the MDT having been updated, as it were, with this new bilateral defense guideline. What is the quick update on the new EDCA sites? Work is expected to begin on 14 US-funded projects in 4 new EDCA sites. Since these are new sites, we presume the conditions and terms are the same as the previous 5 sites. My question is, the last time USEC Galvez stated that construction and work cannot begin unless the exchange of notes between the two countries has been finalized. So, have we agreed on the exchange of notes? Meron na ba? At yung mga annex to provide the nature of the activities in the new sites? Magpapa-update lang kami sa EDCA. Aba? Yes, Asek Gonzaga.
Yes po, Madam Chair. With respect to the 4 new sites, as you referred to the statements of OIC Galvez and Secretary Manalo, actually also at that time, at the last hearing, the exchange of notes have not yet been completed on the 4 new sites. So we're still currently in discussions with the US side on finalizing those notes po.
Eh bakit sinabi sa dyaryo na magsisimula na yung construction sa 14 projects in 4 sites kung wala pang exchange of notes? Di ba dapat magkaliwanagan muna?
That's correct. I'm not sure, Madam Chair, about the context of that particular statement, but I think what is a matter of fact is that there are already specific projects that are envisioned for these new sites. But obviously, as you correctly pointed out, I don't think the AFP or the DND will allow construction to begin until after the notes are completed po.
So we're assured that in fact construction hasn't begun until the exchange of notes has been settled. Is that the guarantee? SND, please. For new sites, yung 5, walang problema yun kasi matagal nang tapos yun, delayed nga eh. Yung bago, yung 4. Kasi ang binibida sa dyaryo, uumpisahan na. Eh, nagtataka ako, wala pang balita na may exchange of notes na final.
As of now, Madam Chair, the projects have been undertaken to the old sites, to the 5 sites.
Yes,
To
I
the new
recall that
sites.
the 5 sites, the last time they reported only 20% completed.
Yes, ma'am.
So, tinatapos muna yung 5 sites. Are we assured of that? Bakit may balita na nag-umpisa na doon sa 4 new sites?
Wala pa po.
Hindi totoo?
Hindi po. Wala pa po.
Okay. Yes, Senator Antiveros,
Just to
please.
follow up on the question of the chair, naalala ko po kasi yung previous closed door briefing nyo sa amin and then yung hearing, tinanong po ng chair, wala bang papel ang Kongreso or at least ang Senado dun sa pag-alam sa 4 na bagong site? So even now, na palapit hopefully yung exchange of notes, ganun pa rin ba yung status? Walang papel ang Senado sa usaping ito?
Thank you. Thank you, Yusek. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think, and I would stand to be corrected with my colleague from the legal office of the department. Essentially po, I mean, obviously there is no formal role for the Senate because this is just an implementation of an international agreement already that that has been ruled as not needing also Senate concurrence in the context of EDCA. But obviously the engagement that we do, and of course the cooperation that we can promise the committee in terms of briefing you, in terms of providing you updates, I think that goes without saying po.
Just for the record, Madam Chair, syempre po na-appreciate ko yung patuloy na commitment sa mga briefings, sa pag-update. Pero siguro naintindihan nyo rin po why this is a nagre-rankle, long-standing issue dahil siniseryoso din ng Senado na kami yung treaty-making body. So anumang mga bagay ng international relations, syempre medyo ina-assert namin yung papel. So, but I can leave it at that for now. At least na-register ko, Madam Chair, na continuing concern din po itong ng komite. Salamat po.
Yes, I think the distinction always has been between a treaty and an executive agreement. Time and again, EDCA has been defined by the Supreme Court as an executive agreement and therefore the purview of the executive. Pero hindi naman sinasabi na hindi dapat malaman din ng mga ibang opisyal. Okay, so eto nga, we have your assurance therefore that should there be an exchange of notes, maabisuhan naman kami kahit paano na okay na yung exchange of notes at maliwanag na para makapag-umpisa ng trabaho sa iba't ibang bagong EDCA sites kasi wala pa kaming balita kundi nababasa lamang sa dyaryo. The news about the long overdue review of the 1951 MDT continues to circulate. It's your opinion, however, that the new bilateral Senator Tolentino has stated that the metropolitan territory should be redefined to include other territories where the Philippines exercises sovereign rights, including the West Philippine Sea. Any reaction to that, please? Or is the bilateral defense guidelines provided, the new one in May, baka pwede na yon dahil maliwanag naman dyan? What are your thoughts? Yung armed forces, aircraft, public vessels are all covered by the MDT. Is it necessary to amend the definition of metropolitan territory still?
Madam Chair, well, with due respect to Senator Tolentino's views on the issue, I think the position that we take with respect to this particular suggestion is that we suggest to the senator that it already the current statements or in the defense guidelines that were issued in May, as well as the various commitments on the part of U.S. government officials, clarify already the coverage of the mutual defense treaty, as including the areas that that he seeks to sort of explicitly.
So
put in an
okay na to yung armed attack in the Pacific, including anywhere in the South China
China Sea.
Sea, on
Yes.
either of their public vessels, aircraft, or armed forces, which include their coast guards.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay na yan. Kasi it encompasses anywhere in the South China Sea.
And anyone.
Anywhere and anyone and anything. Kasi may vessels, aircraft, and armed force. Tama ba? Including Coast Guard. So, malawak na yung definition na yan. So, it also states that we should modernize the MDT. Obviously, 1951 pa. Wala pang cyber attack, wala pang AI, wala pang robotics. Are the new defense guidelines sufficiently updated?
Yes, Madam Chair. Again, it also explicitly recognizes already that cyberspace is a domain in which an armed attack can take place. And the guidelines actually have a couple of really specific provisions about enhancing our capabilities there. I'll just make reference to Article 5A on cooperation, Article 4A on the exercises with respect to cyber attacks, as well as 1F on ensuring interoperability between the U.S. and Philippine Armed Forces. Thank you po.
Madam
Okay.
Chair?
Yes, Senator De La Rosa, please.
Hindi ba natin pwedeng idagdag dyan yung kuwan? Yung kuha nila ng tubig, water cannon? Alam natin, it does not constitute armed attack.
Armed attack.
Pero yung epekto niya sa ating mga Coast Guard na tatamaan, pag tinamaan yung Coast Guard natin doon at natumba, nahampas yung ulo doon sa sahig ng barko, ganun pa rin, patay pa rin yun. Madam Chair, hindi nga, walang bala na pinutok, tubig lang. Pero ang effect sa injury, even death, kapag tinamaan yung ating mga tao doon, nahampas yung ulo doon sa sahig ng boat, patay pa rin.
Yun na nga eh.
Ewan ko kung how do we do that? Pwede idagdag yan doon. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Itatanong ko rin yan eh, kasi sabi doon sa provisions ng guideline, cyber attacks and non-conventional threats. Ano yun? Non-conventional ba yung water cannon?
Kung tanungin mo yung Bureau of Fire, conventional yan. Pero pag tanungin mo yung Philippine Coast Guard, unconventional yan. Unconventional yan sa Philippine Coast Guard.
Pero
Bureau of Fire,
pero ayon ngayon dito sa bagong defense guidelines, pati non-conventional covered.
Saka Madam Chair.
Tama ba yung wording na nababasa ko? Cyber attacks and non-conventional threats.
Madam Chair.
Sakop na yung water cannon.
Madam Chair.
Tama ba?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
dun
that's
sa
Senator
Ayungin
Esmaster.
incident, in fact, naalala ko sabi ng Coast Guard, yung pagdadala ng tubig sa barko ay para lang sa firefighting. Kaya talagang maling-mali yung ginawa ng China sa atin doon.
What do we understand with regard to non-conventional threats?
Thank you.
Kayo nag-negotiate niyan eh. Paliwanag na lang yun sa amin. Kasali ba si water cannon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, actually, if I can just say that we're still, yes, that appears in the bilateral guidelines, but I think there's still a lot of discussion about the specific kinds of activities that would be considered as coming under that. Obviously, lawyers on both sides have things to say about these things, about water cannons, about all other kinds of activities. I will just say that we're currently, and also we have to look at the guidelines as a living document. So discussions are ongoing, and Sec Lorenzo and I continue to discuss with our US counterparts, and we're hoping to get better clarification. But
I think there's no need to be overly legalistic. Sa atin. The operative word is threat. Clearly, the water cannons were a threat of some sort, di ba? Whether classified as conventional or non-conventional, it was quite clearly a threat. And the subject is threat. The modifier is the conventionality of the threat. Kaya,
Yes, which brings us to another issue that I'm sure you have questions about, which is like unfortunately, there is going to be a legal process
Kaya nga,
in terms
paano
of
ba ito?
identifying those.
Kaya nga.
Madam Chair,
Ayaw natin manggulo, pero ayaw naman natin na inaapi tayo mayat maya.
Madam Chair,
Senator De La Rosa, please.
I think it's only appropriate for this committee to advise DFA lahat na ng bagay na to our advantage, isaksak na ninyo. Bahala na silang umayaw. Kung umayaw yung Amerika, wala tayong magawa. Pero kung yung ikakalamang natin, dapat isaksak natin. Di ba? Baka yung laser attack. Hindi yan kasama. Pero kung pwede isama natin, so that China will run out of unconventional tactics to bully our people. Idagdag natin doon. Para malaman lang, kasama na pala yan. Hindi natin gawin yan. So mag-imbento. Ha? Yun. Weather balloon. Lahat na lang pwede. Ako lang ang taga-DFA. Kahit na bordering to whatever, basta lamang tayo, doon tayo. Yun ang ating dapat mga posisyon. Yun lang, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, speaking of which, hindi ba natin pwedeng amendahan ang EDCA na may bayad naman sa mga LGU? At saka yung MDT mismo, may sinasabing civic action, assistance to the community, at paulit-ulit yung sinasabing disaster and humanitarian assistance. Samantalang tayo pa ang nagbabayad ng kuryente, ng tubig, at lahat. Kaya't hindi ba dapat amendahan EDCA, no? Para at least isama naman yung pagbabayad at yung civic action na sinasaad ng MDT. Yes, Senator Antiveros. Any
Salamat,
action
Madam Chair.
po sa kanila?
Madam Chair,
Wala bang pinag-uusapang kabayaran?
we can explore that, Madam Chair. But normally, usually, the EDCA sites, there are US aid projects for the community. So, may mapupunta po sa community, US aid project.
Wala kami naramdaman eh. Ang buong norte,
Ma-
sinalanta ng 2 bagyo.
Ba- ba-
Pero, nandun yung EDCA sites, wala naman kami naramdaman kahit isa.
Yes, Madam Chair. But they recommended this, actually, the US aid projects plus other community projects.
Yeah,
in
yung
EDCA
civic
sites.
action, 1951 pa yan, hindi bago yan.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
That is-
Yes, Senator De La Rosa.
mabuti ka, wala kang naramdaman. Ako wala talaga akong nakita. Sir, like for example, yung Zamboanga, yung kampo na Zamboanga na 24 hours sila naka-aircon, ibig mong sabihin, yung anong kampo natin dyan sa Zamboanga? Yung Mismincom natin ang nagbabayad ng kuryente nila? Ganun ba ibig sabihin nun, sir? Sila?
I think, sir, separate ang meter nun, sir. They pay for the electric bill.
O tubig kuryente daw, sabi ni Madam Chair.
When I was in West Vincom, they pay for their...
Next hearing, sir, you require them to submit to us their electric bill payment, ha?
Yes, Your
Na
Honor.
sila talaga nagbayad, ha?
Yes, Your Honor.
Laruin natin. Kawawa naman tayo. Wala na nga silang renta dyan. Hindi sa nagrenta, tayo pa magbabayad sa kuryente nila. Sobrang pang-abuso naman yan. Tapos sabi nila, meron silang mga, ano sabi mo sir, mga project na, wala man tayo nakita. Wala man tayo nakita. So, Pilipino tayo, huwag tayo magpaisa. Tingnan natin kung iniisahan tayo, hindi maganda yun. Madam Chair, yun lang, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator. Yes, let's allow Yusek Espino to respond and then we
Madam
call on
Chair,
Senator Antiveros.
actually, that subject or topic was discussed by Secretary Austin and Secretary Teodoro. Community site projects and USAID projects at EDCA sites. So eventually, I'm sure there are going to be USAID projects in these EDCA sites.
1951 pa to, Nasa MDT,
This,
Dinidiscuss pa rin.
this administration, Madam Chair, I think there will be realities to these
It's a long time coming.
projects. I hope.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Antiveros.
Salamat, Chair. Follow up ko yung mga tanong ni Chair at saka idagdag ko itong aspect na may mga observers at analysts na nilarawan yung MDT bilang unequal arrangement. Lalo na considering na, gaya ng sinabi ng chair, yung US, in-update na niya yung security arrangements sa ibang partners niya sa region. Halimbawa, Japan, several times na within the same time frame of the last 70 years. So, understandably, pwedeng sabihin na kinonsider tayong second-class ally for some time. At sa konteksto nung kasaysayan natin na we were a former colony of the US, may kasabihan pa nga noon, di ba, ang tingin sa atin little brown brothers. Kaya ngayon, pag pinag-uusapan yung pag-review, pag-update ng MDT, ang inisip ko po ngayon, ally natin ng US, lalo na para effectively push back tayo sa China. Pero that alliance has to be defined as an alliance between equals. Yan po. So, I wanted to ask how we can ensure that itong arrangement, reviewed, updated, kung anong itatawag natin na MDT, hindi unequal, na rerespetuhin ng US yung soberanya natin at hindi tayo matitreat na junior partners.
Madam Chair.
Salamat, Yusek. Dagdag lang dun sa questioning ni Chair, ano pong ginagawa natin para i-modernize nga at i-update yung ating security arrangements sa US at saka ibang partners sa region para sapat na i-confront yung hamon ng aggressive posture at saka gray zone tactics ng Chinese government sa West Philippine Sea. Kung may maidadagdag po dun sa earlier na mga sagot nyo sa Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just expound on our general strategy on how we would address the situation in the West Philippine Sea. Basically, ma'am, we are looking at three lines of efforts. Because the problem in the West Philippine Sea is multifaceted, no? It cannot be just look on one prism. So our approach generally is to first strengthen our economy, sanction-proof if it possible, because currently our economy is very vulnerable to sanction by our powerful partners, and our ability to make a tougher position or response would be dependent on how resilient our economy on sanctions. So that one, sir, ma'am. And then another is to leverage our alliances, not only with the Americans, but all other security partners in the region, all those that believe in the principle of a rule-based international order. And the next is, of course, to modernize our armed forces. These three are interrelated. Once we achieve a certain level of resilience and the support that we get from our alliance, from our partners, not only on military aspect, but we are trying to put economic dimension on those alliances, even the MDT, and we develop our credible defense posture, then we can make a more tougher position in the West Philippines to address the situation. So, and all of these things, ma'am, is underpinned by strategic communication led by the Department of Foreign Affairs and other relevant agencies. So, in a nutshell, ma'am, that is the way we intend to respond to the challenges in the West Philippines. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Chair.
Salamat, Yusek, Madam Chair. At given itong tatlong lines of efforts, ano yung mga provision sa MDT na kailangan i-clarify o i-modernize kung mayroon man?
Ma'am, the continuous review of the MDT make it a living document, as ASEC JB has said. So all of those no longer relevant provision, like the expansion of the definition of a metropolitan territory, the inclusion of non-conventional threats, and putting a economic dimension on the MDT, not only on purely military, would I think it is one way of our ways of modernizing the alliance. So it is, since we understood that in 1951 we are only confronting a bipolar world of the Cold War, but now security situation is different. So we have to address some of the provisions, include other dimension that would allow us as treaty partners and as an individual country to address the emerging situation in our security environment, ma'am.
Maraming salamat, Yusek, Madam Chair. I still have questions about cyber attacks kung pwede before we...
Yeah. May I just, so that we can round out this discussion, in an article a few days ago, on the 7th of August, the DFA spokesperson, Ms. Dasa, stated that it is not yet time for the Philippines to say if the recent water cannon attack perpetrated by China against Philippine personnel already warrants the invocation of Washington's Mutual Defense Treaty with Manila. May we request the DFA to expound on this statement? It is not yet time. Why? When will it be time?
Madam Chair, with regards to, I believe, to the statement of our spokesperson, it's because I think the recent incident of the water cannons, there is a technical international law definition, I believe, on act of aggression. So now we are carefully studying the recent incident and how this relates to the recent incident. I think that is the reason why our spokesperson gave that statement. It is being studied very carefully.
Yes, well, international law defines act of aggression, and even that is changing. Shouldn't our own guidelines, agreed upon by both the US and the Philippines, be upheld since it refers to non-conventional threats? This is very clearly a threat.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Ate Gonzaga,
I
please.
think I'll just go back to my earlier answer that we have agreed on that reference to non-conventional threats. I think there is joint appreciation of the fact that we face non-conventional threats in the current security environment. However, I think what we haven't gone to the next step of really being able to agree on the specific activities, specific acts that would constitute that. There might be some that are like clearly non-conventional threats already, but I think with respect to the water cannon, as I said, that continues to be examined and studied by the lawyers.
I'm not suggesting that we invoke the MDT for every little irritant. But on the other hand, we also have to be very clear about laser lights, about water cannon, about mysterious weather balloons, and so on. This had to be dealt with. Is there any effort to do so?
Yes, Madam Chair, as I said, that's currently being studied very carefully by the lawyers, but unfortunately, we're not at that point where we're able to say one way or the other what
There's nothing
what
to
those things
study.
are.
This is all unconventional. It's happening as we go along.
Yeah.
Wala namang papag-aralan, puros bago to eh. Anyway, kinatatakutan ko itong statement ng DFA na it is not yet time. Kailan ba matatapos to? Yung pag-aaral na to? Dapat may deadline rin tayo. Otherwise, sinaapi-api tayo, wala tayong magawa kasi wala tayong definition, pinag-aaralan pa, and it is always not yet time. Paano ba yun?
We will. I'm not in a position to give an answer, Madam Chair, but we sincerely understand your perspective, and I'll definitely convey to the Secretary and to the
Hindi,
Undersecretary.
sinasabi ko lang, it should be sooner rather than later. Even if you don't have a very precise and complete listing of said unconventional attacks, we should have a general notion of what these threats constitute. Diba? Anyway, tatanong ko na lang about interoperability. There's a clear, glaring disparity in the equipment used by the US versus the Philippines. Sabi nga ng mga sundalo, tululaway na lamang sila sa BFA at ang iniiwan yung mga bulok na truck at iba pang EDA. What has the US given the AFP in the past 3 years? Is it significant? And what do we expect in the next 5 years for all this effort in EDCA, adding sites and increasing exponentially the VFA exercises, may mapapala ba tayo dito? Halimbawa, kung interoperability with US systems is required, as well as with the other major defense partners, shouldn't there be a requirement that the big ticket procurements under Horizon 2 and 3, even the remainder, yung mga tira-tira ng Horizon 1, hindi ba dapat yun ang unahin, or are there other priorities?
Good afternoon, ma'am. In terms of interoperability, I think that's the trust right now of the Defense Department. The standing guidance for the Armed Forces of the Philippines is that all projects should be looked at whether they are interoperable with not only with our allies, but also with our other services. So interoperability with respect to the different services and
Yes, but we've been
interoperability.
talking about this for a long
Yes,
time,
yes,
di ba? And they're really not interoperable. We bought from Russia, we bought from China, we bought from Korea, and they very often don't match.
Yes. But the guidance for us right now is all of the projects that we are proposing should include a discussion or a parameter with respect to interoperability. So we are making sure that
So what has the US given lately? At saka yung ano pang pinapangako nila in the next few years?
I don't have the data right now for the past.
Mga three, yung recent.
Recent as I think there are C-130s, ma'am, that has been given to us. I think there's.
Okay, kung pwede lang kaming i-provide.
Yes, ma'am. We'll provide the data.
What we're trying to determine is, of course, sulit ba to? Di ba? Ano bang binibigay sa atin? Are we requiring at any point na they should comply with Horizon 2 and 3? Are we maintaining those priorities, or do you have other priorities na ngayon?
We're still maintaining the same priorities. In fact, with respect to the security sector assistance roadmap, this is.
Kung tutuusin, doon sa Horizon, wala naman drone and radar communications. Pero yun ang binigay. Okay lang ba yun? Hindi ba dapat yung ibigay yung gusto natin talaga? There's nothing about frigates, nothing about fighter jet. That's what we actually wanted, di ba? Pero yung binigay, sige na lang.
Yes, ma'am.
Parang, ano ibig sabihin ng interoperability? And sabi nga ni Senator Ontiveros, dapat equal partners. Ang layo eh.
We usually discuss this during the Mutual Defense Board and Security Engagement Board meetings, and it's an exchange of data with respect to our requirements and what they can give. So
To the
most of
extent
those.
that you can, siguro, General, if you would, kung maaari, bigyan na lang yung information kahit hindi ngayon, siguro sa executive session or even sa confidential document.
Yes, we will.
Dahil we are aware that there are weapons acquisition programs and packages being promised by the United States, but we're also curious what these are, because right now, the FMF being given is tiny, although of course it was increased from last year. When you compare it to countries like Egypt with 1.3 US dollars annually, Israel 3.3 billion, Jordan 400 million, Taiwan padagdag ng padagdag, hindi na natin mabilang. Why are we not getting more? That's really the question.
We will submit to the committee, ma'am, the equipment that we.
Because if you recall, in the MDT, it's very clear that the MDT also requires the United States and the Philippines to coordinate closely on the Philippines defense budget planning. In short, dapat tumulong sila sa modernization from Horizon 1, 2, and 3. Dapat compliant doon. Pero parang hindi nangyayari eh. Ibibigay lang nila yung gusto nila. Tama ba yun? Di ba? Balikan natin yung MDT. Nandun kasi eh. Dapat sa defense budget planning kasama sila at kilalanin nila yung priorities natin. Yun lang. Paalala naman natin na nandyan. Of course, PCG, for example, the Coast Guard, hindi naman siya kasali sa AFP, but modernizing and beefing up the PCG is of vital importance. So are we aware of any PCG modernization or assistance packages from the United States? Wala yatang PCG ngayon. Ay, andyan. O kaya? Opo. Kasi yung PCG, critical po yung role ninyo. Meron ba tayong assistance from the US or mga packages na pinapangako?
Yes, Honorable Chair, Ma'am Risa Ontiveros, Senator Ontiveros, we do with the US. And
Ano nga yun? Ano yung specific if you're open to divulging?
like for example, ma'am, if you will look at the geography of Palawan, one point na trinatraverse po ng barko natin papunta sa West Philippine Sea is the Buliluyan Point. And we're looking into, in collaboration with them, the development of a facility there where we can position our ships to be more efficient. That is an example po. ma'am.
Bagong egg ka na naman. Hindi, tinatanong ko lang, wala bang binibigay na equipment, financing scheme, programs, additional gunboats, frigates, whatever, I don't know.
It is part of what we
Kahit
have been
Coast Guard kayo, alam naman
Opo,
natin
ma'am.
yung ginagampanan ninyo lampas pa sa Navy
Opo, ma'am. There are talks, ma'am, lalo na when the Vice President of the US came and they gave a commitment. So meron pong programs for equipment as well. This may involve likewise floating assets or bottoms. And lately, ma'am, if I'm not mistaken, if we can add it, kung pwede po natin madagdag, yung INL po, past the anniversary of the arbitral tribunal on 12 July, nung sinelebrate yung 7th, yung INL or the International Narcotics Law Enforcement Agency gave 2 drones. Yun po, very tangible po for the meantime. And we're looking into
But that's not from the US
US ma'am INL.
I'm asking ano na ibigay ng US?
Yung INL po is an agency of the United States, ma'am.
It's international.
Yes, ma'am, but it's in collaboration, ma'am, with it's a US agency basically, ma'am. It's named that way.
Okay, pero yung outright na binigay ng US mismo, wala?
Sige, kindly please elaborate also.
Sir, good afternoon, Madam Chair. For the Philippine Coast Guard, we received the drones that was mentioned by Admiral Punsalan. They're also helping the Philippine Coast Guard for a port facility. This is not an extension of EDCA, sir, ma'am. This is actually for the Philippine Coast Guard. They also help us in developing our training center in Balagtas, Bulacan, wherein our Coast Guard personnel are trained for manning the Coast Guard vessel and also operation of small boats. So those are the outright, and not to mention as well the National Coast Watch Center, ma'am. The National Coast Watch Center is manned by the Philippine Coast Guard. In terms of the radars, the AAS capability, the MDA infrastructure of the entire National Coast Watch is funded and constructed because of the United States, ma'am.
Sige, bigyan na lang ninyo kami ng kopya. And then what do we look forward to in the next 5 years? Because I know there should be programs.
Yes, ma'am. The United States, through cooperation with the United States Coast Guard, are also looking into allocation of our donation of additional Coast Guard vessels that are decommissioned from the U.S. Coast Guard inventory, ma'am. It is while we are still waiting for the approval of the United States Congress, the intention for next year is for us to receive at least 2 decommissioned U.S. Coast Guard vessels. And then in the next coming years, they're still going to support us for our port facilities that will enable the Philippine Coast Guard to maintain our presence in different parts of the country, ma'am. And then the last one is, which is the most important one, is the maritime domain awareness capability of the Philippine Coast Guard and the National Coast Watch Center, ma'am.
Okay.
So that we can be
The
able to,
maritime, sorry, can you?
maritime domain awareness, ma'am.
Okay.
So that we can be able to effectively monitor the presence of all foreign vessels within our maritime domain, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Yes, CG Punsalan.
Opo, ma'am. Thank you very much po. Ma'am, if I may add, along all this is the interoperability on the ground. So just last 01.
Yes, that's why we're asking
Opo, ma'am.
what equipment are they giving, because it's all in pursuit of interoperability, isn't it?
Opo, ma'am. And nilang worth mentioning po siguro na just last 01 June 2023, naganap po yung pinakaunang trilateral exercise po. We have US and Japan with us. Naganap po yun. Nasubukan po yung mga trainings na we got from the both nations that we are collaborating with. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you. And Senator Ontiveros, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paalala lang, dahil binanggit nyo, Vice Admiral Punsalan, yung maritime domain awareness, ang DFA also has been conducting an information and education campaign tungkol sa arbitral award. So, makamaganda na yung mga ahensya natin, departments and agencies na may similar efforts. Kumbaga, parang force multiplier din, as we were talking about SEATO earlier, para matutunan ng bawat Pilipino, lalo na yung mga bata natin, how we are an archipelagic, a maritime nation with even more water than land territory in our national territory. And then, Madam Chair, just before I go to my last questions about cyber attacks, hindi ko matapos pag-isipan yung discussion kanina about the ongoing study on acts of aggression. And like itong water cannoning na ginawa sa Coast Guard natin, baka nga talagang the Chinese Coast Guard was keeping it within the domain of gray zone tactics para hindi siya umabot sa threshold ng act of aggression, defined as an armed attack, precisely para hindi matrigger yung MDT. And I don't know, Madam Chair, if the new security guidelines shed some light on, dahil it's short of an act of war, at I think marami kung di man lahat tayo ayaw matrigger yung MDT, it remains a deterrent na paano tayo pa rin effectively makaresponde sa ganyang offensive actions. So lastly, Madam Chair, kasi nabanggit na rin kanina yung cyber attacks, just a few questions. Ano po yung risks involved sa isang kumpanya, and here I'm talking about Udena Corporation, affiliated with China Telecom, na pinapayagang mag-install ng telecommunications equipment malapit o sa loob mismo ng ating Philippine military bases? At paano pwedeng ma-mitigate yung mga risks na yon? What you are able lang, sirs and ma'ams, to tell in open hearing. I actually filed a resolution on this, Madam Chair, last Congress pa. Kaya lang hindi, it was referred to the then Committee on National Defense, kaya lang hindi narinig, kaya gusto ko lang itanong ulit for any comments from our resource persons.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Currently, I don't have the answer to that question, ma'am, but we'll coordinate with our other staff to, I believe they have a position already on that, and we will submit to the committee as soon as we get it. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Madam Chair. Kaugnay po, kasi nasa cyber attacks topic pa rin tayo, parang merong disinformation network nagkukondukta ng kampanya sa loob ng bansa natin na sumusuporta sa polisiya ng Chinese government sa West Philippine Sea. Meron din po bang mga Pilipinong kasangkot dito? Kaya, alam ba ng ating mga security agencies ito? And if so, anong gagawin natin laban sa ganitong klaseng foreign interference sa ating internal affairs? Again, only what you're able to say in open hearing.
Madam Chair, we'll just check if we have a representative from the NICA.
Kanina meron.
Meron kaya? Do we have any information regarding it? The question of
Maybe to help if it can, natanong ko rin sa isang hearing dati, previous Congress, kay then National Security Advisor Esperon. Opo,
Nagkuhan tayo, di ba? Nag-executive session.
nag-executive session kasi ang tanong po ay meron ba tayong cyber defense strategy and therefore meron ba tayong cyber defense program? And at that time parang wala pa or nasa super infant stages pa. So I don't know what, and Nika might update us about this na pwedeng gawin na hindi sa executive session.
Yes, good afternoon po. Director Tatanes po from NICA. We will check our records on this, but on cybersecurity, I don't know if we have representatives here from our DICT who are in a better position to answer the query.
Madam Chair, may DICT ba tayo dito? All right, thank you, Ma'am Totanyes and General and Madam Chair. Just to my last question, pero sabihin ko, i-make of record ko lang po na mula nung nakaraang kongreso hanggang ngayon, ang posisyon ko po ay tanggalin natin ang any Chinese government state-owned enterprise na nasa telecoms, lalo na sa loob ng ating sariling mga military camps and facilities. So lastly po, Madam Chair, kung yung mga foreign state-initiated cyber attacks are to be considered armed attacks, na tingin ko rin bilang civilian, medyo fuzzy naman yon. Kaya baka, di ko alam kung napag-uusapan din ito together with mga water cannoning. But if they are considered attacks, and I do consider them attacks, anong countermeasures ang dapat ma-provide for sa ilalim ng isang updated, modernized MDT at pati sa ating ibang security arrangements? Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. The author is here of the resolution. And so that, sir, Madam Chair, I just had a pending question, but I realized that the author of the resolution is here.
Shall we allow Senator Ontiveros to finish, or?
Go ahead.
It's my last question, Madam Chair. Thank you, Sen. Francis. If anyone of the resource persons would care to address that question, kung anong countermeasures ang pwede sa ilalim ng MDT o sa ilalim ng ibang security agreements natin kaugnay ng foreign cyber attacks.
Madam Chair. Yeah. So, Madam Chair, just quickly to respond to Senator Hontiveros' question. Well, yung binabanggit po ninyo, ma'am, na like hybrid or irregular warfare, that's already in the radar screen of the Philippine-US Defense Alliance. And as a matter of fact, that's already explicitly recognized in the defense guidelines as well. So in response to your last question, I think we're in the early stages of really trying to understand the nature and the scope and the breadth of the threat of irregular and hybrid warfare. So I think eventually, but there are a lot of things or aspects in the defense guidelines that already speak about, working on cooperation, interoperability, building into our exercises this issue of hybrid and irregular warfare. So obviously, moving forward, we're not going to be focusing on just the kinetic exercises, but we will be focusing also on tabletop exercises, roundtable, discussions, anticipating all of these threats that are new to us in the current security environment that we have.
Thank you, ASEC, Madam Chair. Although baka hindi ganun ka-new. We've been talking about them for a few years. Of course, it goes without saying, way ahead ang US sa atin dito. Sila mismo, di ba, tinanggal yata nila yung Huawei sa kanilang, and I think EU countries have done similar put up similar safeguards in the current environment. So there's a lot we can learn from. At sana po maihabol talaga yung cyber defense strategy and programs kasi sa panahon ngayon, mahirap naman pong magpatuloy kung wala pa rin or hilaw pa rin. So salamat po ASEC, salamat Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. And we now have the author of both the resolutions we dealt with. First, the SEATO and SEATO Defense, as well as the MDT and its updating. So we recognize herewith Senator Francis Tolentino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry for being late because I attended the selection process of the new presiding justice of the Court of Appeals. It took us several hours and it will take another day tomorrow to finish that procedure. I just realized that you have a committee hearing today. But thank you, Madam Chair, for hearing these two resolutions. From my previous conversation with you, Your Honor, I think the MDT was lengthily tackled, and I just heard the words interoperability, modernizing defense capabilities, as well as cybersecurity. So I'll just have myself self-educated by reading the transcripts. But again, the purpose of the resolution, Madam Chair, is really to upgrade our current MDT to include new threats, which would include cybersecurity and perhaps the expansion of the Indo-Pacific notion. Is it just really South China Sea? Do we involve other countries as well? So having said that, Madam Chair, I will just rely on your quick appraisal once we have a break after the session today. And then as regards the SEATO, I've been asking since the time of Teddy Boy Locsin, buhay pa ba tong SEATO? So wala na yung SEATO. Pero yung nanay ng SEATO, yung Southeast Asia Collective Defense Treaty, is under Article 10, the treaty shall, quote unquote, the treaty shall remain in force indefinitely. My reading of this, and looking at the Vienna Convention, the law of treaties, is that this mutual defense, the Southeast Asia Collective Defense Treaty is still in existence, notwithstanding the opinion coming from the FA and others. Kasi a treaty can exist just between two countries. And if you look at the website of the United States, still there. Diba? So sino ba yung umatras lang? Umatras lang is Pakistan, for obvious reasons, but other countries are still they still recognize the Manila Pact. And the Manila Pact, the Secretariat is supposed to be Manila, although it was originally signed, it was likewise signed in Bangkok. So, Madam Chair, if you can just give me a few minutes para educate lang ako sa DFA. Buhay pa ba ho yung, although wala ko kanina.
Actually submitted a yeah, and it's Mr. Reyes who explained that although it may technically be still contained in the books of two countries, it's been deleted in most others. So, Mr. Reyes, please.
Magandang hapon
Sorry,
po.
pinapaulit kita, pero tayo ba dinilit na natin?
Yes, sir.
So wala na.
Wala na po
So,
sa
opinion
with
nyo,
regard to the Philippines.
when was this deleted?
We can check, sir, kung kailan po.
Kasi the last time we had Secretary Locsin here, nandun pa eh. And then the same is true with my continuing query, although this is not related to this inquiry, is the Asia Pacific Fisheries Commission. This was signed in Baguio years ago. Tayo rin ang secretariat, the Asia Pacific Fisheries Commission. Asia Pacific, this APFIC is envisioned to promote full and proper utilization of living aquatic resources in the Asia Pacific area. So, anong tugon din ng doon ng DFA? Kasi ngayon, kukulang tayo sa isda. Nahirapan tayo mga isda sa West Philippine Sea. Ito yung function nun. Tayo rin ang secretariat. Sa Baguio po ito nilagdaan. May from DFA? Pang-apat na budget hearing ko nang tinatanong ito eh.
For in my capacity right now, sir, I can check. I can check, sir, in my capacity. But I think this has been discussed again. We acknowledge that this has been discussed before. But in my personal capacity right now, sir, I can check. I will check.
Kasi nung huling nabalitaan ko, hindi raw tayo nagbabayad ng dues. Mura lang eh, parang $300 kung ano. I might be mistaken. Yun lamang po, Madam Chair, and I will restudy this again. Don't want to take much of the committee's time. If as intimated by the good chair, there is a forthcoming institutionalization of the guidelines
Last May.
last May. So would that, if I ask the FA, would that be converted as a protocol to the MDT?
Comes an annex, I think.
As an annex, would that need a Senate concurrence?
No.
Wala na? So approve na lang, pasok na rin doon yung mga EDCA.
Madam Chair, well, actually, it's been issued and signed already,
Okay.
Madam Chair. So it's, I think we provided to the Secretariat a copy, but we can provide the Senator's Office a copy of the guidelines.
Then, once and for all, Southeast Asia Collective Defense Treaty, wala na?
Ay, hindi po SEATO yun, sir. We're referring to the MDT.
No, the second question ko yan. Don't be confused. Baka hindi kayo pinamerienda rito.
Sorry.
So, yung pangalawang question ko, yung Southeast Asia Defense Treaty, wala na?
It is the view of the department po. Na,
The view of what about the other parties?
yung
So the view of the department is consistent with Article 10, that the treaty shall remain in force indefinitely. The view of the department is consistent with the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties.
with the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, Your Honor, with paragraph B po.
What is paragraph D? That the view of the DFA will be supreme and primary
Hindi naman, sir.
in terms of interpretation.
It is our view, sir.
It
is
is
our
your
view.
view,
It is
your
our-
personal view.
No, sir. It is the department's view.
Can we
sir.
be given a
Yes, sir.
written document
Yes, sir.
signifying that view officially?
Yes, sir.
And then the third question, yung Asia Pacific fisheries.
Yes, sir.
What is your view?
I'll check, sir, and we'll submit something in writing.
Pang-apat na budget hearing na to, Madam Chair, yung sa fisheries. Kasi problema mangingisda eh. Tayo yung sa Baguio City pinirmahan yon. I think 1946, 1947, if I'm not mistaken. Yun lamang po, Madam Chair. Pasensya na, nahuli po ako.
No
Marami
problem,
pa sana
no
ako
problem.
itatanong.
Thank
Thank you, ma'am.
You've raised many interesting issues, and actually, I not certain that the committee is in receipt of the May bilateral defense guidelines. Can you make certain that we are officially in receipt of the same? Further, may I also urge, since we're in the process of expanding the MDT through the much more expeditious means of amending the bilateral defense guidelines, should there not be a provision reinvigorating our defense industry in line with the self-defense posture and the amendment of the Foreign Investment Act? Perhaps we can also include in the future MDT guidelines, since it's in the process of, since it's a work in progress, perhaps it can be included that part of the goals of both parties should be to support the local defense industry of the Philippines. After all, a self-reliant defense posture is the best deterrence of all, rather than relying on outside forces several hundred kilometers away. It's most important that we develop our own capacity to resist armed attacks. And I was thinking that perhaps this could be included in future deliberations. What are your thoughts from the Defense Department, please? This is part and parcel of the SRDP. At the end of the day, we're just asking other parties to join us. Yes, Yusek Madriaga.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, one of the major program of our current Secretary of National Defense, Secretary Chodoro, is to reinvigorate the SRDP. But the concept would be a departure from the common concept of we buy equipment and then there would be a technology transfer. Now, the concept being envisioned by the Secretary to jumpstart the SRDP is to make investment at source for disruptive and emerging technology so that the companies that we invested in for the technology would have incentive to actually invest and develop plants and facilities in the Philippines as against to the conventional concept of just we buy to them and then they build the factory and
Yes.
transfer technology.
Precisely, yeah. And as I said, please relay to the Secretary the changes in the Foreign Investment Act that now allow the same, so that interoperability be taken to the next level where the manufacturers actually transferred to the users, which would be the Philippine soldiers. So I think that's absolutely essential also, no? And I think I have one final query, and in the unfortunate incident that we have no choice but to invoke the MDT, what is the understanding of DFA, DND, and the rest of the officials here, particularly the Coast Guard, when it comes to the legal process of the United States aiding us? Isn't it clear that the declaration of war can only be made by the U.S. Congress before the U.S. can come to our aid? On the other hand, U.S. presidents have actually waged war without the mechanism of their constitution requiring the Congress to approve the same. What are your thoughts?
Madam Chair.
Assuming, as I said, this disastrous incident, for example, occurs, anong mangyayari? Anong gagawin natin? Titimbrehan natin yung Amerika, no? O di sasabihin ng US, teka, ang aming proseso, babalikan muna yung kongreso namin. Mag-iintay tayo ng napakatagal na panahon kasi hiwa-hiwalay rin sila. Paano ba yun?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. Well, if with the chair and the committee's indulgence, can I just say that one, we've had very extensive discussions with the U.S. side about that particular question. Two, we would request that if we can discuss this at the executive session that you plan to call on the two other issues that you raised with D&D. I just don't want to have my statements taken out of context. And also, of course, I need the.
Yes, just to update Senator Tolentino, the two other issues were with regard to the acquisition plan for weaponry, is that correct? And the water cannon, is that correct? What were the two issues? I recall there were two issues earlier. Let's just make certain we're all discussing the same two issues.
I'm trying to recall also, but I know
I
that
think
we promised you an executive session on the Ayungin question. The
There was
Sierra
a
Madre.
Ayungin question. There was another executive session or submission of expected deliveries of the United States to us.
Submission of report on the expected and delivered items.
Yes, I think not only the AFP but also the Coast Guard. Just to recap properly. So the first was an update on the Ayungin. What was the action or what are the actions that we will take and the development since the unfortunate incident. Secondly, the expected deliveries of the different agencies concerned. Wasn't there also a short list from USEC Rambuanga, not in the executive session, but just a submission with regard to the procedure of the U.S. aircraft coming into the Philippines? And yes, you were going to deal in the executive session also with now this mechanism to invoke and activate the MDT. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. I mean, at least update you on the status of discussions between the two sides.
Is there anything you can tell us now? I mean, it's very, very clear there's no specific format under U.S. law for an official war declaration to be made. However, it's very clear that the Constitution in the United States vests it entirely upon Congress. However, on many, many occasions, including the war in Vietnam and the Korean War, no declaration of war was deemed necessary by Congress. So, is there anything you can tell us?
We can leave it at that now, Madam Chair, with your permission.
Eh, ako nag-recite, hindi ikaw. Ang daya kaya.
Thank you.
You can include Madam Chair President George W. Bush
Yeah.
on several occasions, and Jimmy Carter as well.
Apparently, there's at least 125 occasions when the U.S. president has employed military force without authorization from Congress. So, napakadalas na. So, it's not a cut and dried thing despite the fact that it's contained in the Constitution. Sige, so perhaps the thing to do now is to schedule, therefore, the executive session at the earliest possible opportunity with regard to the subjects aforementioned.
Chair.
Yes, Senator Antivero.
Just one last note, Madam Chair. I'm one, I think, among many, if not all of us, who would like to retain the MDT as a very powerful deterrent. Opo, just to affirming that and focus talaga dun sa 3 lines of efforts na sinabi to make it unpalatable for China to trigger the MDT at dahil din sa pressure ng ibang mga treaty allies and partners natin. Parang ibang klaseng Madam Chair, coalition of the unwilling na magkaroon ng gulo whether sa West Philippine Sea or sa Taiwan or kung saan pa man siya nanggugulo dyan o maaring nagigirian yung dalawang malaking bansa. So just to affirm that, Madam Chair. Salamat po.
Yes, Senator Tolentino.
One request to the Department of National Defense, Strategic Assessment and Planning. If you have any plans on how to upgrade the current Philippine Aerospace Development Corporation, which is now attached to the Office of the Secretary of National Defense, which is supposed to be our main aviation group. We have plans. And number 2, thinking out loud, have you ever envisioned yourselves having jurisdiction over the Philippine Space Agency? Kung ilipat na natin sa DND yung Philippine Space Agency.
Ay, pero
Operating drones, operating satellites, etc. etc.
dami niyang civilian.
Yun lang, if you can submit us a position paper on this.
Will do.
Thank you. Or any thoughts? Wala na siguro. One-liner, quotable here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Your Honor, regarding the PADC, currently it is being submitted, the abilities are being submitted for the extension of its corporate life. But looking at the financial management record of PADC, it would require a total overhaul of the organization for it to be able to be on its feet and financially viable again. We at the Department of National Defense are looking at one of the possibilities just to let the corporate life expire and then we create a new one in order to build from scratch again. The word is putting good money into bad if we continue the organization.
And the second one, the Philippine Space Agency.
But the PADC, sir. The Space Agency, sir, we will consider that, sir, when we give a position paper, sir.
Because
regarding-
later on, probably you'll be envisioning a space command as well.
Looking into the future.
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, one last comment. We've repeatedly mentioned cyber attacks. Let's not forget CBNS, no? The chemical, bio, and nuclear attacks. Parang hindi natin nabanggit. Puro cyber lang when in fact clearly chemical, biological, and other attacks are very, very common these days. So, okay, maraming salamat sa inyong lahat at we herewith suspend the discussion. Looking forward to an executive session to be scheduled as soon as possible. Thank you.